Recording in progress.
Shit, we can't get rid of the.
That's kind of why we're starting a couple minutes late. So
Okay, I got it. All right, so we are good to go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to the February 16th, 2022 Select Board meeting. Pursuant to the governor's order around remote participation during the COVID-19 pandemic, the Select Board is meeting via Zoom tonight. And tonight's meeting is live streamed and being recorded and filmed by WACA-TV. Our chair, Joe Mignani, is not present for tonight's meeting. So as vice chair, I am going to be stepping in to run tonight's meeting. And from a logistics perspective, I would just ask that if you are not currently speaking, that you mute yourself. And if you would like to speak, whether you're a member of the public or the board, please utilize either the raise hand function on the keyboard or through Zoom, or physically raise your hand so I can recognize you. So with that, I'm going to call the meeting to order at 7:07 p.m. and open it up to citizens' participation. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak? I see Mark Tassoni. Mark, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Welcome to the first line of fire.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
All right, yourselves.
Good.
Everybody else being good on the board and all that, and the weather out here is getting better, and my father's getting better in his health, and everything's going well in front of me. And now in the board, the way of doing things, it's good to know. I'm just wondering through the town, has anything we said about COVID and the newest news?
Repeat that again, Mark. The COVID news?
Well, I've been following with the CDC and all the news and all that stuff that there's been a downward trend.
Yes.
And the mask mandate might be taken off in the state.
Yes, that's actually one of the things we're going to discuss later tonight, Mark, is, well, specifically a return to in-person meetings, but with that, we'd probably talk about COVID in general.
Okay, and I tried watching the finance meeting last night, and that kind of was like watching inside a movie, because when it's broadcast, they kind of didn't audiolize.
Yes, we were made aware of that today.
Oh, so WACA kind of will replay it, and then the audio probably come back when it's replayed. So it was good to watch.
Good.
I was learning sign language. I was learning sign language in Braille at the time, but it was good. Everything else is all right. I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Is there anyone else here for citizens' participation that would like to speak? Okay, seeing none. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the agenda. We have a scheduled appearance at 7:10 to celebrate our town clerk, Tara Ward, on her retirement, which is effective March 31st, 2022. I see Tara, and I see lots of other friends here. Tara, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're so happy that we can help celebrate you tonight. So I'm 18 years with the town, and many election cycles and town meetings, and so much more that you have done for our community. So welcome. Oh, you're muted, Tara. You can unmute yourself.
I think she likes being muted. I don't know.
Nope, you're still muted.
All right, there you go.
There you go.
Better?
There you go.
Much better, Tara.
Thank you, Brian. I don't use this, so thank you very much. I appreciate your kind words. They're really nice. I was really surprised. I'm seeing all these these pictures and these names, and I was like, I had no idea. None. I thought it was just gonna be you guys. So I appreciate it.
No, Tara, looks like you've got a lot of friends and family here. Obviously, just a small sampling of your friends and family, but certainly enough to fill the room here, the virtual room.
I didn't tell anybody, Michael. I didn't know. I didn't want.
Tara, you kept a secret?
Yes, I did.
It was just no. I think Brandy, thank you for introducing Tara, and as you said, Tara's been with the town for 18 years. I know when we first did this agenda, we did say something to the effect of celebrate Tara Ward's retirement. It almost didn't sound right, so I'm glad we changed it to Tara Ward on her retirement. Tara has been with us obviously for almost 2 decades, has been in the town clerk business for longer than that. I won't say how long, Tara.
Okay.
But it's been a while, and Tara has certainly seen some changes over the decades, and I would say probably in the last few years, probably has seen a massive amount of changes in a small amount of time. Tara's really seen that office grow, not necessarily from a personnel standpoint, but in terms of responsibilities. So, and you've got the vital records, you also have the election cycle, and then you have public records and things like that. Really, in responding to requests and everything, really started to take a lot of time. But Tara, why don't you tell us what you think the biggest changes have been in the past 20 or something years?
Just in Ashland itself, there's been a lot of changes. Obviously, there's a lot more responsibility that's put into the office, and but I think people, you have to really ebb and flow with this. It's never same day running the same. You can go in there with a list of 20 things to get done, and if you're lucky, if you get 2 done for the day, and you've done well. So, and just as long as we're just happy to be here to help people. I was just always happy to be able to reach out to help people. And my grandson is so sweet. Look at him, my so I just, there's just been so many changes with the elections and whatnot. There's a lot more responsibility, and there's not a lot of filtering right now. So it's a little bit more difficult. So that's really a challenge, I think, in this office, I think. But we try to maintain neutrality and just make sure that everybody knows that they're welcome, and that we're here to help everybody. But I've seen many changes. I couldn't even list them, Michael. There's so many of them that have come and gone over the years. It's just been like, wow, just for the involvement of everything that's going on. It's crazy, but it's nice to be a part of. I was happy to be here for all these years. Really, I've been very grateful, very blessed to be here. I've really loved the people. It's great. I'll miss it, but I'm looking forward to it.
We'll miss you too.
Thank you.
I know Steve has his hand up. I'm sure other board members.
Oh, yeah.
Too. Steve, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Real quickly. So Tara, tell us, who was your favorite town manager?
Oh no. Nope.
Steve, what a troublemaker.
Right now it'd be Michael. I never do that. Everybody's always brought their own specialty.
Very good answer.
There you go.
Good
She's a
answer,
diplomat.
Tara.
Good answer. Good answer, Tara. And I just want to congratulate you and thank you for all the assistance that you've certainly given political candidates over the years as well. And really appreciate, it's just a well-run office. So thank you very much. We're going to miss you. And, I hope you've got some really good retirement plans going on. So enjoy it.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks for your kind words.
Yolanda, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. So I too want to congratulate you, Tara, on your retirement. You will definitely be missed. I have some great memorabilia. I was looking through some paperwork, and I found you used to give out cards for when you were an office holder.
Oh, yes.
And I have
Oh,
one
yeah.
from the first year that I became a school committee member with your signature on it. And
Great.
so that's, yeah. And then I remember you sharing when you got the cane back,
It's up here.
the cane that used to be, that went to the oldest person in
Yeah, yeah.
town, and then it got lost. And then like 2 or 3 years ago, it got returned to the town. So
Right.
I remember your
Don't try
excitement.
to take it with you, Tara.
No, we've already talked about it.
It's right here. We're working on putting it outside in the hall.
I just think your enthusiasm and your willingness to help, from the newest person trying to run for office to those of us who have done it a few times, still getting reminders, and how you've worked with so many different staff members. It's been great having you as our town clerk, and
Oh,
you will be missed. But enjoy retirement, and take lots of adventures and lots of trips, and enjoy the extra time with your children and grandchildren.
I will. Thank you very much, Yolanda. I appreciate it.
Rob, go ahead.
Sure, yeah. I just want to second all those. And Tara, you've been great to work with, strong and steady, but also very understanding with people in a difficult job, as you said. And, I think especially recently, we've seen the importance of well-run elections, and we're kind of spoiled here. We get to vote and, everything's well-run and there's no controversy. And, I consider you and your staff basically the protectors of our democracy. So thank you for your efforts. And, it's been great working with you, and best of luck in your retirement. So
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it.
And I know we have a number of family and guests. I didn't know if anyone wanted to speak as well. That's here to support Tara. Does anyone want to say anything? Or they just, okay. Just wanted to give everyone the opportunity. So Tara, thank you. You've been just a tremendous resource to me. We've been so lucky to have you for 18 years. I love seeing you at town meeting. I'll miss the town meeting and going over to the high school on election day and seeing the chaos there and all the excitement and just, the last couple of years, especially during COVID, when your team had to pivot so much with mail-in ballots and things were just changing so fast. We really appreciate just all the hard work and all the communication and everything that came from you, and you've been a tremendous resource to all of us. So I echo everyone's congratulations and wishing you really just the best in retirement. And I know Joe would say the same thing if he was here. And I'm sure we'll all see you in person before you leave at the end of March. But I'm really glad that you were able to come tonight and we could publicly celebrate you and all that you've done for our community. So thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Brandy. I appreciate those
Right.
words.
Woo, Tara, very nice. Yay.
And thank you to everybody that came to support you tonight. It's great to see so many people here.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Tara. So
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the presentation of town manager's preliminary FY23 budget. Michael, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Brandy. I'm going to try to share my screen here and do this without breaking things. Okay, can everybody see this?
Yep.
Okay, great. So tonight I wanted to talk to you and present to you preliminary operating budget for 2023. It's hard to believe that we're already in the realm of another fiscal year. This is actually going to be the 9th budget I have put together either as the finance director or as town manager. And I believe it's Brittany's 6th as the finance director. So we have a little bit of experience doing this nowadays. That doesn't necessarily mean that the challenges get any easier. In fact, they get a little bit harder each year, especially with the pandemic that we've come through, and we're still going through, I should say. But without further ado, usually what I like to do is when I start thinking about the budget year and when we talk together internally and as a team here, what we're looking to try to do, we try to come up with a set of goals for what we're trying to accomplish. And this year, our goals are really fourfold. It's to support existing projects, so the ones that we currently have on our plate, through proper staffing and funding, capital funding, things of that nature. And that's really important for a number of different reasons. Number one, it helps ensure the retention and well-being of our employees. I think I've told all of you and many more people that we're approaching a breaking point in terms of what we can handle versus who we have on staff and how many people we have on staff. So it's really important to think about them from a retention and a well-being standpoint. We also want to minimize mistakes as much as possible. So to ensure that nothing falls through the cracks or few things fall through the cracks and we don't have some major things fall through the cracks, we need to make sure that we have an adequately sized organization and a proper functioning organization to ensure that that happens. Of course, all of this does cost money. So one of the things that we wanted to be able to do is to present this without the need for an operating budget override. And so this budget does accomplish that. And then in line with that, not only do we want to do it without looking for a tax increase over and above the levy limit, we also still want to keep Ashland one of the best values in Metro West. And, there's a lot of subjective and anecdotal ways that you can measure that. I like to use objective metrics as much as possible. My thing with metrics is that it doesn't always give you the right answers, but it helps you ask the right questions. And I think that's just as important, because if you really want to get to the heart of something, you really want to ask the right questions and peel away those layers of the onion. So moving on to numbers, we'll look at the revenue side of things. Excuse me, I have to move my little strip of people over here. So again, this is the revenue side of things that shows the 2021 actual, the 2022 recap, and then the 2023 budget. And I'm not going to go through each of these individually. You can thank me for that later, but I'm just going to go through some of the highlighted ones here. So first of all, you see that new growth has been lowered to about $400,000. This isn't a surprise. This is something that we have talked about when we really kind of embarked upon the slow or no growth strategy, where we have done things like purchased land and then also utilized other tools that we have to keep land from being developed. We see a corresponding decrease in the amount of new growth and things being developed. And so that's going to lower that new growth number. Again, this isn't a surprise. It's a conscious choice. I hope it was a conscious choice we all made when we presented this to town meeting, some of these purchases to town meeting, and in some cases, even the ballot. But again, we're starting to see the effects of that now. We have been for a little while. At one point, our new growth was well over $1 million. So it was pretty substantial. Another area I want to point out in the revenue side of things is excluded debt. So you'll see that the excluded debt is going up by $445,000, and that's estimated based on bringing the full load of the school project on. And so again, this shouldn't be unexpected either. This should be something that's known and aware by everybody. Moving on down to state aid. I will have to tell you, until about 2 weeks ago, this presentation was a lot different, just because where we had our state aid numbers in terms of growth. Fortunately, over the last couple of weeks, we've received the cherry sheet data from the governor, House 1, and that contained a $1.7 million increase in Chapter 70, which we're certainly happy about and benefit from. You'll see that unrestricted local government aid goes up a little bit by $40,000, But in total, state aid's going up about 15%. This does not, I should point out, this does not show all the categories. It just shows some of the categories and then the total. Local receipts, which is something that communities probably have the most control over in terms of, setting fees, setting rates, et cetera. We're actually projecting a decrease in that of just a little over $100,000. That's driven by a couple of different things, but it's really based a lot on the economy, and we can get into that later. And then finally, on the revenue side, I want to point out the general stabilization and the transfer in. So if you recall back in 2020, when we were just, entering into the stages of the pandemic, we were also going through our budget process at that time too. And so one of the things that we were concerned about is how the recession was going to impact us locally in our local finances. And we felt like there was going to be a decrease in our revenue, but we didn't know how much. So we put together a plan on how we were going to draw down from the stabilization fund, which included a $1.4 million withdrawal. And then we have we step it down to a $900,000 withdrawal this year. And then the plan was to drop it down to $450 in FY23 and ultimately to $0 in FY24. So this still carries out that plan. And so we've allocated $450,000 from the stabilization fund for this. Moving on to the expense side of things. The first one I'll show you is the general government expenditures. Those are projected to go up $428,652, a little over 3.4%. And I should point out that this and the school number does not include all the requests made by our departments. And so we're just going to have to find a way to whittle our numbers down to that. That's not a unique challenge this year. It's something that we do every year. But again, we're projected to go up a little over 3.4% in the general government, and then the public schools going up 4.5%. And this varies a little bit from usually we go up. I'll explain our policy a little bit for those who aren't familiar with it. We go up 2.5% in the municipal government departments, and then 3.75% in the school department. And if we have any money left over after we subtract the fixed cost increases and other increases, if we have any money left over, we split that. 70% goes to the school department, 30% goes to the municipal departments. If by chance, after we factor in those fixed costs and we have less money than what we had that then could support the 2.5 and the 3.75 increase, we actually decrease our corresponding departmental budgets by 70% and 30% as well. We're projecting benefits and insurance to go up about 5%. We've already received our pension assessment, and it was in line with what we had expected, which was an increase. We're now just using a placeholder for our health insurance, which is a big driver of this cost. So hopefully it'll come in line with what we're projecting, but it is looking to go up by a little over 600,000 or 5.26%. Overall, the budget looks to be increased by 4.47% or $3.1 million. And that is generally, generally in line with what our expenses usually go up. I know if you look at the 2021 actual versus the 2022 recap, you'll see very little change there, but you'll see right above that, you'll see where the encumbrances from FY21 actually make up that difference. So any questions so far on some of these numbers or some of these? Okay, if not, I will move on. Again, the first point or first goal that I had as part of this year's budget is to support through staffing and if we needed to, adding additional capital funds, existing capital initiatives. And we have a lot going on in Ashland. We have a lot more going on than any other community of 18,000 around us, and I would say probably in the state. It's just an exciting time to be a part of Ashland and see all of this happening, things that we've been talking about for, in some places, decades, in some cases, decades, I should say. Finally, getting off the ground. First of all, it's the public safety building. Everybody sees the visuals, or gets the visual picture of that as it's gone up. The Mendez School, not too long ago, we were celebrating the groundbreaking, as you can see here with the picture. Mrs. Bennett there on the left, and some of the kids at Mendez participating in part of the groundbreaking ceremony. Those of you who drive are very, very familiar with the downtown and 126 projects. Certainly it's an inconvenience now, but hopefully everybody will feel that it will be all worth it when it's over. Those are really kind of our 4 big infrastructure projects that we're doing right now, but we also have some of these smaller projects, so such as the Warren District, Valentine property, the Riverwalk, and the next phase of that, the Quiet Zone, which is scheduled on the tip for 2024, Cadillac Paint, our strategic plan, the Upper Charles Trail. And then one thing that's becoming more and more apparent is the need to repair, or in some cases replace, our bridges. That's probably going to be our next big infrastructure push. To help support this, we're looking at increasing our staffing, and there's a number of positions that we're contemplating and that I'd love to get your feedback on. First, I don't think we'll be able to fund all of these positions. I think we'll be able to fund some of them, but I don't think we're going to be able to get all of them. And second, I'll just run through some of these positions. One is funding that we've already put in the budget for, which is a project manager and procurement or procurement officer. We put money into that budget last year under facilities. We tried to find ways to maybe do that differently without having to bring on a full-time person. I don't think we're going to be able to accomplish that, but that's something that we probably need more. I know the other departments could probably make a case against that, but we try not to look at it through that lens. Another position is a senior accountant and financial analyst. That's one position. That's not 2 positions, I should point out. Third would be a deputy fire chief for a fire department, obviously. Number of reasons for that position. A library assistant, an additional library assistant, and then also a town engineer. And I can go into these a little bit more and the rationale behind them if you would like me to right now. Otherwise, I can scooch on.
Like, just a quick question. I thought we had a position for a town engineer. What?
We have a stormwater engineer, roughly. I mean, I think is probably the best way to frame it. It is classified as an engineer position, but we're looking at somebody with a stamp, a PE stamp, somebody who can help us out with a lot of different projects, and not just really the stormwater stuff. I mean, Evan does a lot. Evan's main concentration is stormwater, but he also does some other work with other departments as well. I don't want to take that away, but we're really seeing the need for a full-time engineer with a stamp. I think that would probably provide us with a lot of savings, actually, from our contracted services. Wouldn't completely eliminate our need for contracted services, but certainly help take the place of that.
Did we
Just
ever
one
have
last thing,
one?
Michael.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. We did talk about this temporary funding, maybe using contractors that you mentioned for maybe positions that we need to fill, at least on a temporary basis. So I don't know if any of that's applicable to any of these positions, but that's something that we do have funding for next few years that we maybe could apply to this or not.
We could. I mean, I think with contractors, what we're seeing in that arena is that it's almost costing us as much to contract out as it would be to have an employee. It used to not always be that way, but I think for some of these positions, some of these more professional positions, that's what we're seeing. I'm certainly open to using funding sources as long as it can be sustained and maintained after those funding
Yeah, I
those
guess that would
positions
be this would be more like temporary costs. So maybe kind of a stopgap for a few years until there's an ongoing place in the budget for an ongoing position. I suppose that's what I guess I'm getting at here.
Okay. Okay.
Yolanda, I know you had a question or comment?
Yeah, just in regards, didn't we have an engineer who had a stamp a number of years ago and then they left or not? Did they never have one?
I don't recall one. I
Okay.
think the only person that we've had on staff that fits anywhere in the engineer category would be Evan
Okay.
White.
Okay.
Michael, the project manager and procurement person, is that, which department would that be kind of focused on? Is that planning, or is it the town manager's office?
You know, it would really, I think, it would fall in line with either the facilities department or the town manager's office. I think some of these projects that we're talking about, like the Valentine estate, the Cadillac paint things, you know, those really kind of emanate out of this office, in the select board's office, not necessarily from any other departmental department head or department. I think, you know, certainly procurement is handled out of this office. One of the reasons why we need, you know, this type of position is because we have so much procurement going on, and Jen really needs to be freed up to do some of the other things that she was brought on to do. But, you know, I used the example last night when I was the procurement officer here, we maybe did 5 or 6 procurements over a couple year period. Jen probably does 5 or 6 over a 3-month period in any given time. And it's very, very resource intensive. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll move on. Again, one of the goals I talked about was keeping our expenditures per capita one of the best values or making sure Ashland is one of the best values in Metro West. And one of the ways I really like to look at that is through expenditures per capita. I know I've presented this graph before. I know some people say, well, it doesn't include enterprise funds, et cetera. It's a valid criticism. So what we did is we included everybody's enterprise funds, including Ashland's. And then actually our Ashland figure, this 4,474, is inclusive of all the departmental requests that we had received, which is right now about $400,000 more than what the budget is showing. So just keep in mind that $4,474 figure is actually going to go lower. And I would say that would probably put us second from the bottom, you know, right after Marlboro in terms of expenditures per capita. Who knows? We might even be in the lowest. So this is really, I think, to help determine value, not necessarily, you know, activity level or things of that nature. So I don't know if anybody had any questions about this.
Quickly, Michael, are you going to talk about enterprise fund fees later on?
Not tonight, but definitely
okay.
later on. We're going to turn our attention towards the enterprise funds, although I am going to make mention of it here probably in the next slide or so.
Yeah, okay, that's what I wanted to know. Yeah, fine.
Looking in the future, one of the things that I'm really, really concerned about is just the economy. What we're seeing right now is a contraction in some of our elastic revenues. And so this chart shows elastic revenues as a percentage of net operating revenues. Elastic revenues are those that are really heavily dependent upon the economic cycle. So things like motor vehicle excise tax, building permits, rentals, new growth. Those certainly all cycle with the economic fortunes of the country, and I guess, you know, the international economy now. But obviously for several years we were going up and we were doing pretty well, and so now I would say not unexpectedly, we're starting to see a contraction of that. But I'm really interested to see what happens, I think, in the future, especially if the Fed decides to start messing around with interest rates, which it almost seems like they're guaranteed to start doing. I don't know if they're going to just focus first on the short-term rates, or if they're going to start looking at some of the more long-term rates as well and making some changes to them. But that's going to have a pretty significant impact on borrowing costs, and some of the other that's on the bad end. On the good end, we should be seeing some more in our investment revenue as well.
Good. Michael, question about since you're doing some crystal ball work here. Are we still doing forecasting? Are we still looking at 5-year projections and how that looks based on whatever parameters we're using? We haven't reviewed that in a while, so.
No, we'll review it this year. You can actually find the most recent one in the budget document. So that should have the 5-year forecast in it for not just the general fund, but for the enterprise funds as well. I think if the UGC development comes online, I think you might see that new growth number change. If not this year, maybe next year it'll be a little bit higher. But we have a number of developments or redevelopment projects that are in the pipeline, I guess you could say, in various stages of permitting or approvals. And so that could, whatever happens to those could have a big impact on what happens with the local budget in the future as well.
Okay.
Yeah, Michael,
Second
just
question I have. Hold on.
can I follow up on your question, Steve, on new growth?
Please? Can I
Sure,
finish?
sorry.
So second question I have, Michael, is what's going on currently with the school department and their budget formulations?
So the school most recently had a workshop, a half-day Saturday workshop where they're working through some of their requests and going through some of those. I expect to have the school committee to vote on a number. I don't think it's scheduled for their next meeting, but maybe the meeting after that.
Okay, they currently don't have anything up on their websites at this moment regarding the 23 budget. So I would imagine they're clearly in process. So
yeah, and they usually Jim usually puts something out as soon as things are finalized. And again, once we have that number, then we start working to to make sure that everything balances out.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Rob.
Oh, sure. Yeah, just kind of follow up on Steve's question there about the new growth. And you had said your current forecast for 23 is to have is going down, which I guess at this point, I guess you have a pretty good idea of what that, given what's in the pipeline. But we do, as you said, have a number of projects in the pipeline. So wouldn't a new growth number kind of at least be steady over the next few years? I mean, I'm counting besides Sears, we got Bond Street, Chestnut Street, Main Street, potentially. We've got quite a few ongoing projects.
Yeah, I think, Rob, that's a good point. And what would happen is if those projects do come online, you would see a spike in new growth. It's not going to happen in FY23, but we would definitely see a spike. And it might not even really start showing up until 24 or maybe even 25. I think the most one that could have the most impact right now is the UGC development. That could if that does move forward, that could significantly change that new growth number.
Michael, I know we've talked about the ARPA funds, and I know there's been talk and allocations to certain projects and things. It's not necessarily defined to have to happen in one particular fiscal year, but do we have a sense of what projects and things that we've allocated ARPA funds to that will be FY23 line items, maybe not on this particular budget, but in some other way that we would know about?
Yeah, so if I understand your question correctly, Brandy, some of the things that we've allocated ARPA to were already in process, or projects that are in some process. In fact, that was part of the board's guidance, was that we don't take on new projects with these ARPA funds, although we did add a couple of sidewalks. I would say probably most importantly is the Warren Barn, even though those are state ARPA funds. The Valentine property, we've talked about using ARPA funds to help reconstruct the barn. And then also downtown, those are certainly the projects I think that would be first in line for that ARPA funds. The other things that we talked about, the sidewalks, stuff like that, we're probably looking at closer, to calendar year, tail end of 23, calendar year 24.
Okay, thanks. And so, but we won't see those funds either on the revenue or the expenditure side on a particular budget like this. So, correct?
Not on the general fund budget.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh,
Yolanda has-
Just one.
That's
yeah,
okay. Rob started. Go ahead, Rob.
Oh, sorry. Just so how certain are you about this not favorable going out to, well, I guess it only goes to 23. So I guess we kind of know that. I would say the long term might actually be good, given that the economy is hopefully rebounding and inflation could get under control. We could be looking at a bit of a boom. I think we're hoping. So I guess that's more the longer term forecast.
yeah, Rob, if I could forecast that with 100% accuracy, I would not be doing this job. I promise. No, I think a lot of things are just tied to interest rates. I think the housing market's tied to interest rates. I think, again, I think what really matters to us acutely would be how this could a rise in interest rates could impact our borrowing costs going forward. At the same time, on the good end, they should affect positively our investment income, which isn't a whole bunch, but certainly every little bit helps. But how interest rates as a whole just affect the overall economy, I think is not always understood or understood completely. I'm certainly not an expert on it, but I think I could pontificate on a lot of different aspects of this, but I think a lot of stuff is tied to the housing market and people's ability to tap the equity in their homes to do work, which in turn provides jobs for the trades, things like that. I mean, that's just one example of how a change in rates could have a big impact across a lot of different levels.
Okay. So I have two questions. One is more of a comment. So you're saying that we're not going to see the ARPA funds in a regular general revenue budget. So can you make sure that you work with Brittany that we are shown something as to where those ARPA funds are being used, how they're being used, how they're being budgeted, so that there's visibility for those ARPA funds moving forward?
We can. I'm going to assume, I'll check with Brittany, but I'm going to assume she's planning on including that as part of her other revenue pages in the budget document. So where we have the revolving funds, where we have some of the special revenue accounts. I'll double check and ensure that she's planning on doing it, but I do believe she's planning on including it there.
Because we are currently using some ARPA funds in our 2022 budget, right now. Right, some of the stuff that we got last year for some of the road work. I mean, we already have ARPA funds that we've used for stuff, and it would be good to sort of see.
Yes, I don't think we've tapped into them directly, Yolanda, yet. I think they've just been set aside. I'll double check on that. You're talking about the state allocation, right?
The state allocation and our local allocation, right? There was the first round of funding from the CARES Act, so not ARPA, but CARES Act. So,
yeah, we definitely have spent, that was around $1.5 million.
Right. So that wasn't, It's not like we added that to our 2022 budget and then went 2.5% over that, right? That was just additional
Right.
funds that we had to use. So it would be good at some point to see where where those funds came in and where those funds went out.
Okay.
And how it impacted our overall spending. For me, I think I'd be interested, and I'm sure there's residents that would like to see, we got these CARES Act money and we're getting ARPA money. Where are we actually spending it?
Yeah, I second that.
I would
And
agree.
then, and again, I know you won't have that tonight. My second question in regards to borrowing is, are we in any position to do some of the borrowing, either some of the longer term borrowing that we need to do before the interest rates go up? Is there anything like we're poised to do and we could try to pull it in to save some money on some of this borrowing?
We were talking about doing a major borrowing for the Mendez school probably at the end of the summer.
Yeah.
So I think we'll be able to squeeze that in before we see any major changes in interest rates.
Okay.
But I'd be hesitant to do it any sooner than that, just because we want
Okay.
to make sure that we'd have a
Everything
good sense of
covered.
what the costs are and what it
Okay.
looks like.
Oh, just, let's pay attention to that. And if there's anything we can do to keep it within some of the lower interest rates. So, okay, those are my two big questions. And I mean, obviously need to go into some of the more detail, but thank you.
Okay. Let's see, move on. So just to go into what the next steps are, seems like a perfect segue for that. One of the things that we need to do is we need to wait for a little bit more clarification on some of our fixed cost charges. I think I mentioned the health insurance budget before, but in addition to that, the Keefe Tech budget is an important one. I'm hoping that we see a decrease from our previous year's assessment. I will say that the number of students from Ashland has declined, and the percentage of Ashland students as the total student body has declined, but the budget is going up. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Michael, have you gotten any indication from them as to how they're going to look to solve their pool problem?
Yeah, it
And
was
will we
interesting.
be impacted by that, and how?
So I was with Superintendent Evans along with the other area town managers and administrators when that memo actually went out, and he was discussing the issue with us at the time. I just want to point out the $5 million number is a very preliminary number. It could be lower, it could be higher. I can tell you one of the main topics of discussion at that meeting was how can this be done without going to the communities for an assessment. And I can tell you that even though we don't necessarily have specifics, or Superintendent Evans doesn't have specifics on how to make that happen, it does seem to be his intention to do this without having to put it on the backs of the communities, or at least on the backs.
Maybe they can use ARPA or grant funding or something.
Well, there's a lot of infrastructure funds that should be coming down to the state. We're going to continue to work on the enterprise funds. The one I really want to highlight for you is the trash funds and the trash contract. I think it's going to be unavoidable that we have to raise fees at some point. We had a really good deal with the last contract that we negotiated, and even looking at competitive bids just for the same type of service, not making any changes, it looks like costs are going to increase significantly. We need to make decisions on the positions that we proposed. Like I said, I don't think we'll be able to hire all of them or fill all of them. So we need to prioritize those. And then once the school department budget is completed, and I've been notified that the school is set to have their hearing on the budget on March 17th, I believe. And then they'll have their own budget document published just prior to that. But once they get that number, we'll work with the school department to resolve any discrepancies that that we might have between our respective budgets.
So can we try to get a tri-board meeting before they make their final vote? Because I would think that we would want to have a discussion before, because if they make their final vote and then we have a tri-board meeting, I think it would be difficult for, to hear their rationale and encourage them to make changes.
Yeah, I think we can, Yolanda. Jim and I talked about that the last time we spoke, which has been a couple weeks ago, about the timing of that and some of the
Yeah.
things that we think are important. So I do think we can make that happen. I
Okay.
mean, it's more than a month away, so we
Yeah.
should be able to do something beforehand.
Okay.
Michael, for the trash contract, what is your timing on that? Is that, I assume pretty soon you'll be coming to us with more details of what that would look like and potential fees?
Yeah, so the trash contract, the existing one will expire in June, so we need to have something set up in place for July. Yes, I will be bringing back the details that we can discuss. Maybe not at our first meeting in March, but possibly at our second meeting in March.
Michael, it'd also be good. I'd like to discuss some of the details in the contract. I don't know if anybody went, did anyone go to the thing today for MMA on the future of recycling? I wanted to go, but had a conflict, but you know, I think we all realize it's a complicated issue. I'd like to hear what kind of things are in the contract, what you're talking about.
Yeah, I can definitely say that the recycling market has changed a little bit for the better for us.
Oh, well, that's good.
You know, in terms of the costs associated with disposal.
Did you say it's changing for the better?
At least from a community standpoint.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah, you know, it's not much, but every little bit helps.
Sure.
So,
You know, I know I know we're not talking specifics tonight, but it's I don't know if there's a way to structure the contract, the trash contract. So, you know, I feel like we're trying to encourage people to do things like compost and recycle. And, you know, I think if there was some sort of program that we could do to help move that, you know, whether it's, you know, paying more for the trash bags rather than the base fee for recycling. I'm just throwing ideas out there, but just trying to think of ways that we can encourage, you know, less waste and you know, I don't know if, you know, going back to Rob's point, I don't know if MMA has anything out there about, you know, sort of like best practices, you know, what communities might do to help encourage that. But I would definitely be interested to see if there was something that we could do for that.
well, our recycling. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to add, Brandy, that the Sustainability Committee might also be a good resource to work with on this contract, because they're always thinking about compost and recycling issues.
Well, you know, my advice would probably be to look at the trash contract in kind of the current services that it provides and talk about that fee structure, because you're right. If you want to incentivize people to recycle more, you know, one of the ways you would do that on the fee end of things is price the bags more. Of course, we also have a service issue with the bags as well. And I know not everybody has it, but enough has it that it's an issue, a widespread issue and not just an isolated issue. So I think we have that to consider as well. And then I think we can look at adjuncts to, you know, that standard contract for things like composting and, you know, other ways to get things out of the waste stream, you know, whether it's, you know, reusing particular items or giving them away. I know we have a very active, like, buy nothing group here, as well as there's very active buy nothing groups in other communities as well. So that whole reuse part of the reduce, reuse, recycle mantra.
Michael, is there anything we could do regionally?
Potentially, Frank was working on some regional stuff with a couple of different towns about that. As you know, we had that regional agreement with Black Earth Compost.
Right, and we still have that, right?
We do.
Yeah, so I mean, that was, you know, multiple towns working together to try and increase the numbers so that the price is lower. mean, it would be
Yeah,
good to.
that's definitely something Eve will continue
Okay.
to help with.
Michael, quick question, since we're talking sustainability, can you either refresh my memory or the board's memory on the sustainability position? We've hired
Mhm.
a new manager,
Mhm.
starts on the 22nd.
That's correct.
You know, and we may have talked about this. I apologize if I don't recall it, but refresh my memory at least.
Well, we haven't introduced her to the board yet. We're
Okay.
planning on doing that when she started, but Eve is, her name is Eve Carey. She's currently the recycling coordinator in the town of Sharon. She's in the process of getting her master's degree in environmental studies at Penn State. She's worked with a number of other organizations in the recycling world and the sustainability world. She doesn't have a whole ton of experience yet, but the experience that she has is certainly relevant to what we're trying to accomplish. And you know, she is really kind of what we envisioned for that position, I believe.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll look forward to meeting her.
Yeah. It was a pretty thorough process, so to come out on top of that was pretty competitive.
So thank you, Michael. Does anyone else have any questions on the budget, or are we okay to move on?
I guess just one last question in regards to the positions. Will you be talking through us, talking it through with us or with your staff and then coming back to us, or what is your process going to be looking at those
Well,
positions that you've proposed?
I would love to have your feedback. I realize we didn't get
Okay.
into too much detail about them. But I'm certainly open to have a conversation with you individually and
Okay.
give you some of the rationale. The department heads have done a pretty good job of putting that down on paper as well. So that might be helpful
Okay,
in your evaluation.
great.
Okay.
good.
Well, thank you for listening, and stay tuned.
Michael. Okay, so we're moving on to old new business and discuss the select board scholarship. I know Susan had sent us some information on it in our packet. I believe, Susan, you had said that the high school had reached out to you regarding whether we were going to offer a scholarship for this upcoming graduation. Is that
correct? They were gathering information because other scholarships have already come in, and so they wanted to know if we were going to offer it, and if so, what the timeline was going to be.
sounds good? So last year we did 2 scholarships. Last year we had done one male, 1 female, and I know we've talked about this in a couple different meetings and at our retreat about not doing being gender neutral on the scholarships and just offering up 2 scholarships. And we did 1,500 last year. Is that correct, Susan?
Yep.
Now, does the board have any thoughts on that?
Oh, sorry, Steve, you raised your hand. I just jumped in.
Trying to play by the rules.
I know.
So the scholarship is open to all Ashland residents, graduating seniors. So I guess my question is more directed to Susan. How do we get this information out to, besides the high school, to Keefe, to charter schools, whatever other institution applies?
So normally I try to reach out to as many of the schools as possible. The Keefe Tech, Norfolk Aggie, Tri-County, Assabet. I try to reach out to all of those schools and Ashland High School, but we can also ask Beth and Ashley if they can push it out through Michael's newsletter or whatever social media platforms they have.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it gets to the right guidance departments, because that's where this, I guess that they accept all of the information for the scholarships and put it out to the students. So I want to make sure that the other guidance counselors or offices are aware of this opportunity.
That's how I've done it in the past, is I've reached out to the guidance departments of each, but we haven't had much feedback from them, and I'm not really sure why.
Okay, well, thank you.
You know,
I know there's a
Uh,
number.
wait, Rob.
Oh, sorry,
My
sorry. I'm
hand is
sorry.
up.
Okay. I'm bad. I got to get under
Yeah.
control here.
So a couple things. One, I would definitely like us to update our policy, and I'm willing to write it up so we can vote it at our next one. But I definitely I think we need to just say 2 scholarships to, 2 deserving students. I think that makes more sense, especially since the last couple of years, we've really seen a large number of more young women are applying than young men. And in a lot of places, just because you're a guy doesn't mean you should get it over a woman. No offense to anybody. I think it's just to go to the 2 most deserving students. And I'm willing to continue on the scholarship subcommittee to do. So, once I'm willing to update the bylaw and present it for the next meeting so we can vote on it. And I'm also willing to be on the subcommittee to review it. I know typically we ask them to be in by the middle of May, so we can review them before graduation.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I support that, Yolanda. I imagine that you and Joe would do this again unless Joe's going to want to opt out. I think we pretty much agreed that we make it gender neutral. That seemed like a good idea. The only thing I would add for Susan, I know there's a number of kids that go to Worcester Academy, believe it or not, from Ashland. I see them on the train heading to Worcester. So you might want to include that in your list of notifications. That's it. Thanks.
So I think it sounds like we're all in agreement that we want to offer the 2 scholarships. Susan, I know you'll have to update the Google form that's out there and get the word out. And I know that you need us to go ahead and vote to approve that we open these up. So Susan had given us a suggested motion to open up the Select Board scholarship for up to 2 graduating seniors pursuing to further their education. Each scholarship awarded will be in the amount of $1,500. Scholarship applications must be submitted no later than May 15th, 2022. Could I get a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Roll call vote.
Greaves, aye.
Mitchell, I.
Here,
Hinsman, aye. Passes 4-0-0. Thank you, guys. So Susan, you'll reach out and you'll start that process and get the information out there. Thank you so much for doing that. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, we're going to update on the racial equity study and the next step. Michael, you'll take us through this?
Sure. So just to remind the board and those watching at home or online, we recently completed a racial equity study through our racial equity steering group. And that study came back, which was, we had utilized Suffolk University and their expertise to help with that. They came back with a number of recommendations for us to implement and really kind of start putting us on the right path to being a more open and welcoming community. And I think many of us took that to heart. I know the board certainly did. And so what our next steps were, okay, or how do we take that information and how do we take that data and how do we actually include it in and incorporate it into some type of action plan? And so we realized as we were going through this that we needed to get a little bit more information. And one of the things in order to make some specific recommendations. So what I'm proposing to do is that we would create a diversity, equity, and inclusion task force for the purpose of establishing policy recommendations for the select board to adopt. And when I'm talking about policies, I'm talking about things such as, human resources. So hiring, diversity of candidates, things of that nature, but then also including as part of that, like our workplace atmosphere and our openness in general to the community. The other things I think we should really focus on are equity and land use decisions, equity in our volunteer appointed boards and committees. I think that's something that's within the select board's purview. And then also establishing a grievance process for complaints. That's one of the things that we've heard through the survey and through some of our anecdotal evidence, is that people sometimes don't feel like there's a defined process, or in some cases a comfortable process that people can utilize if they have an issue. And so all of these policies they'll have clearly defined goals, objectives, and again, metrics. And that's to help the town determine, I should say, the progress that we're making towards those goals and objectives. So who would be a part of this, this task force? It would include members of the Racial Equity Steering Committee, a person representing, I think, the youth of our community is very, very important. And we would probably utilize the school department to help identify that person. Also, I think it's important to include some of our other non-governmental organizations that are active in this. So I would propose a member of the Ashland Residents for Equity in Action to be a part of that group, as well as a member of Ashland United. And then I think we kind of went back and forth on this in the steering committee. Whether we should have departmental members be an active, like, permanent part of this group, or should they be brought in and discussed as needed. And I think at the very least we settled that we really should have a representative from the school and police departments at the table at all times. So that is what my proposal is in terms of a next step. Again, we'd be working on developing policies for the select board to adopt. I won't list them all again, but again, and I should point out that list was not exhaustive by any means. It was just a sampling.
Michael, I just that the list that you talked about, it seems to me it will kind of will come together a little bit more clearly once you actually have the task force in place, because I feel like having set goals is a little sort of premature until you have sort of everyone in a room that has that has a voice as to what kind of look like. So that's my thought on that. So thank you.
I would agree. If I may add just one thing before we jump into questions, and I think just to illustrate how something like this would work. So I think one of the outcomes that a lot of people, if not everybody, could agree upon is that we would like to see more diversity in our workforce. Okay, so that's a clear outcome, a clear goal. But how do you get there? Some people would just say, okay, you hire more people of color into these positions. But what if that candidate pool that you have to hire people from doesn't contain any BIPOC candidates? So we need to look at the candidate pool first, and how can we expand the candidate pool? And then you peel again a layer of the onion back, and you say, okay, well, how many people of color are actually in municipal positions? And now that's a larger issue than Ashland. That's certainly a statewide and nationwide issue, but we can help play a role in fixing that issue. Making sure that we have people of color entering into public service and starting their career paths, so that when we do get to a point where we're hiring people, we have a robust, diverse candidate pool, and then we can make choices, informed choices from there. So it can get a little bit complicated, Brandy, to your point, and it needs to be well thought out, especially if we're going to start including accountability metrics as part of it.
Okay, thank you. Rob, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Sure. Just, Mike, I had a question and a couple questions. One is, what did you mean about land use decisions? How does that work into this?
Well, it's interesting. I think there's been a lot of research recently about how some recent land use decisions, and specifically zoning, tend to isolate minorities and people of color. And I think that's an important thing that we have to think about when, or, whoever's sitting in the chair making the decisions, or chairs, I should say, making the decisions. I think it needs to be viewed through that lens as well. I mean, how would this decision, just Rob, just like we talk about sustainability, like we should view all of our decisions through a sustainability lens. We should also look at it through a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens as well. And how are the decisions that are being made either advancing some of the goals that we have, identified and prioritized, or are they working against them? And I think that's an important thing that we should identify and really try to incorporate.
Okay, and my other question or just comment in terms of participation on this committee, is the HR director involved in that, or in terms of, or is that something you see as not as integral as other things?
No, we would have the HR director, the economic development director, certainly as needed, come in and have conversations and work on things and work on goals with us.
Sort of
Again,
like
maybe add them as part of the permanent working group, but I think at the very
okay.
least.
And my last comment, I said you said it was still under consideration. I don't have any other specific groups to suggest, but I think there should be some others out there to think about, active in the community, that you may want to include on this.
We did. It was interesting. So we had this discussion, and if you can think of any groups, actually any of you, if you can think of any groups that would be well served with representation on the working group, please let me know. But we identified the Ashland Indians Club as a group. KG Narayana, who was on the steering group, he would be part of the working group, and then also a member of the clergy. And so Rabbi Eric Gervis, who's also part of the steering committee, would be able to represent the clergy, but then also the Jewish faith as well.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Yolanda, I know you have your hand up too. Go ahead.
Find that unmute button. So Michael, you're thinking that members of the current steering committee, the 3 or 4 people there, would become part of the task force?
Correct.
Okay, but then you'd expand it from there as well. That makes sense. In regards to representative from the school, I think that makes sense. The police department, would you have someone from the fire department and or some of the town unions?
The town unions?
Yeah. Or just
At
bring
some
them in
point,
as you're having discussion.
We would bring them in as we were having discussions. You actually bring up a really good point. Anytime we start talking about workplace changes and changes really in the environment and some of the policies, it's important to keep our union members informed and engaged in the conversation. So they would definitely be brought into the table.
Because I would definitely think long-term, we need our unions to work with their regional union representatives to see how they can increase their union membership in regards to people of color, right? Because, just like you said, with government positions, you got to get them to be going to the education to be able to get them to come into the roles of local government, in whether it's town hall or public works, or I mean that's what the schools are dealing with, right? Trying to find more people of color to work in the schools. Well, you have to have that candidate pool. So I think that's a good next step. I would definitely think that we need to keep having the conversation here at our select board meetings, and certainly in your town manager newsletter, let people know what you're doing in regards to this, and have conversations with the public, right? So once you get your task force in place, and I like the idea that they would then bring stuff back to the select board and not necessarily have someone from the select board as part of it, because I think people may be willing to talk a little bit more, but maybe also bring us there at some point to your task force to say, okay, what are we seeing and how can we cooperate and or encourage, or what questions and issues that we're seeing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Steve, go ahead.
So your time, what do you think your timeline is on this? I mean, it seems to me like a pretty substantial undertaking, and certainly not a short-term commitment by, anybody that's signing on. So how do you, I guess, how do you foresee this thing kind of evolving as you start to dig into, some very complex subjects and areas, as you described earlier, areas that really need to be peeled back and looked at. So, so can you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think we should have a substantial amount of the work done and a report back to the select board on that within 60 to 90 days. With hopefully everything finalized in a final draft policy, although that's kind of an oxymoron, presented to the select board within a 30 to 60 day period after that.
Okay. All right, sounds ambitious. I hope it, obviously very important work, and I hope it gets accomplished in that time frame.
Yeah, me too. I really struggle sometimes with those ambitious timelines and goals. But I feel like this is reasonable, and I think it's supported, I think, Steve, by like you said, the importance of the work.
Sure. Okay, great. Thanks, Mike.
Go ahead, Yolanda.
One final thing, I would say, yes, this is very, very important work, but I think it's more important that we get it right than we rush it through. If you're finding that it's taking a little bit longer, I think as long as you keep us informed as to where you're at with the process, I think that's equally as important as that. Right now, there's a real sense and urgency from people to get this work done. But I think it's important that the work gets done correctly with enough input from a lot of different voices as we make these decisions, and we bring this in regards to changes to, bylaws or decisions, or, however you want to do it. So that would
I
be
appreciate
my only,
that, and I
my only
appreciate
point.
I totally understand your point, and I appreciate that, and appreciate the support for that.
So Michael, your next steps on this is to pull together this task force. This isn't going to be a formal committee that we appoint per se, but it's going to be, your timing to get the task force together is probably how soon?
I would say within 3 weeks. I mean, the good news is that with the steering committee, we already have the basis of that. I don't think we would have any lack of interest from our friends at Area or Ashland is United. I think it might be a little bit difficult to find a young person who is willing to put the kind of time commitment in that we're talking about, but I'm sure they are out there. And I would certainly lean upon the superintendent and members of the school committee and the school staff to identify that person.
And members of Area, they may know students that are already doing the work at the high school or the middle school and want to
Correct.
participate.
We'll look under every rock, that's for sure.
So I know that we have some folks here from Area on our meeting tonight. I wanted to just give the public an opportunity if they had questions or anything specific to ask, that we open it up for any comments or questions. Does anybody have anything? Just either use the raise hand function or raise your hand, literally. Okay. I'm not seeing anything. So so thank you, Michael. I think that this is I think this is it's a good plan. I think that this will be a good next step and something that we will all be following and wanting to see how this evolves and how the task force comes together. So thank you for putting that together.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, discussion of potential changes of building permit fees. Michael, turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you. So this is something that our current building commissioner brought to both mine and Jen's attention as he was reviewing a number of different operational aspects of the department. We haven't really looked at our fee structure, our building permit fee structure since 2006. Right now, we're currently in the middle range in terms of fees of some of the towns the surrounding towns that were looked at. But we certainly have some room, I think, to put us, I think, more in line with the average or closer to the top, while not going out to be an outlier. We would look at raising some of these fees. One of the things that's driving this is that our inspectors haven't had a raise since that time, or our wiring and plumbing inspectors, I should say. So currently they get paid $25 per an inspection, Doug, and it's been that way since I've been here. Doug has recommended that gets boosted to 30, and I agree with that. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at trying to accomplish. The other thing is, what we're also trying to accomplish is, I think, I'm trying to think of the right word here. I don't want to say make up for the fact, but compensate for the fact that the trades have completely changed, and the building codes have become much more advanced, much more technical. Now they have sustainability elements that have been incorporated into it, and those are really, really, really good. It's harder. It takes a little more time, though, to educate homeowners and even contractors about some of those changes, and to make sure that people are working within the parameters set by the building code. And so this is one of the things that we're trying to look at. I think Doug Scott, who's our building commissioner, provided a memo to you, and I know you received it pretty late, to hopefully that explains a little bit of what we're trying to do a little bit better than what I'm doing right now. But just as a bottom line, currently for building fees, for example, we're currently at $10 per thousand with a minimum of $50. What is being proposed is $15 per thousand with a minimum of 75, and that's for residential. And for commercial, again, it's currently at 10 per 1,000 with a minimum of 50, and Doug is proposing moving that to 20 with a minimum of 150. So that's for the building permit fees. The other thing that Doug has asked to do, and I agree with, is to consolidate a number of fees that we have into this one fee. And I think you got a whole spreadsheet with some of the fees and things of that nature. And you can see just how complicated it is and how many we have. So with electrical, so what has been done is deleted a number of the separate fees and changed the bulk of the fees to $10 per $1,000 worth of cost, with a minimum of 60, and then move multi-residential units from $100 to a unit to $125. And then with plumbing, currently right now, that's $100 per 3 inspections. What's being proposed is a flat fee of $150. Currently for commercial, it's $150 per 3 inspections, and what's being proposed is a flat fee of $200. It's pretty simple and pretty straightforward. Any questions? I'm not asking for the board to vote on this right now.
Oh, good, because
Right.
I mean, we got it late. I haven't had a chance to really take
Yeah.
a look through it, and I know
Just
you're
wanted to
going over
introduce
the
it and have the
details, but
initial
okay,
discussion.
okay, thanks.
Keith, go ahead.
So yeah, I agree with Yolanda. I did scan through it. It was a little confusing, just mainly because of the layout of the how he was describing the new scenario. But to go back to the inspection fee, so $25 per visit. So typically, let's say in a residential situation, you go there for a rough inspection, and then you go there for a finish inspection. So I'm assuming every visit they get compensated $25, and if we approve this, it'll be $30. How about with major construction project like the public safety building or the Mendez, where they're going there could be many more multiples of time to inspect certain components. So how does it work in that situation?
So with things like multi-residential or multifamily housing, so what the change would be a per unit. So it would go to $150, I believe $150 per unit.
No, I'm talking, Michael, about the compensation to the inspector. How does that work? So if they, let's say he goes to let's say the plumbing contractor goes to the public safety building every day this week, what happens?
Well, fortunately, he gets paid a salary, the building commissioner does. So that
Yeah,
helps
but-
with that. But no, the inspectors, if though they would get paid the $25 per.
visit. So if
Yep.
they went 5 times during the course of a week, okay, just good.
Rob, go ahead.
You're
You're
muted, Rob.
Yeah, I thought that was a good letter that Doug wrote. He did say in it would raise it by 30, but the inspection fee, I think he meant raise it by 5 to 30.
I caught that too, Rob.
Yeah. But otherwise, I thought it was, a good rationale. I think I'm generally supportive of the concept. And, we'll see, pending further discussion. You had originally raised this in the context of budget revenue. What, do you have a position or a projection on that other than, matching the needs of the inspectors?
I think it's really matching the needs of the inspectors. I think, Rob, you're bringing up a point because all this money goes into the general fund. Is there a way that we could better account for it? I think, and that's something that.
Well, I thought, a few months ago, you had raised, one of the things you're thinking of doing is raising building fee. And that's this, right? So I didn't know if there was a budget impact that you thought there might be here.
It could, depending on when yes, it would definitely have a budget impact. It's not necessarily being done for the budgetary impact. It's not necessarily a revenue designed to be a revenue maker.
Okay, and I thought that it seems like a good rationale. Well, a couple things. One is, the fact that our fees are in the middle or in the lower end is, I think, important. And the idea that increasing complexity and need for expertise in this thing, I think, is a valid point. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions and then I'll go back to you, Yolanda.
Okay.
So the, when we would raise these fees, are we still pretty much in the middle of the pack in reference to other communities?
In some cases, yes, we would be like on a couple of these categories, we'd be in the middle. Like, I think on one of them for like the building permit fees, sorry, it's a little loud out here. We would be towards the higher end, but we wouldn't exceed like what's the highest in the region. I think Framingham's the highest in the region, or at least one of the highest, and they're at 15.
So I had some difficulty trying to figure out Doug's spreadsheet, trying to see what the changes were. Before we vote on anything, would it be possible to see it side by side, what current versus proposed is? Because I think it's trying to figure out where he's going with this is a little.
Yeah, and we've worked on it a bit too as well. So we'll definitely have it more cleaned up and more.
Well, everything's in the letter. Is that right, or am I missing something?
So you should have. I think you got a couple of spreadsheets too, Rob.
Right. No, I looked at the spreadsheets, but the letters seem to have the.
Yeah. I was just looking at the spreadsheet, trying to compare.
Yeah.
Figure out what. So just for backup purposes, I think it would be helpful. And then the other thing, so there's not a revenue target that we're trying to hit. It's more just taking a look at what the real costs are to be able to cover the services that are being provided, correct?
That's a really good, concise way of putting it. And as we've had this conversation, some of you have said a couple of things that have got my mind working a little bit. So in terms of how to better account for that. So
And
we'll probably incorporate that into the next time we discuss this.
And just from a personal perspective, I know I've mentioned this to you before, Michael, but I'm mentioning it again now. I think it would be really helpful for Doug and his team to put information up on the website as to what is needed so residents have some education around when they need to build, to pull permits and things like that, because there's really nothing out there that gives any real information of what you need and when you need to do it. So, just from just an education perspective, I think it would be really helpful if there was something on there that, unless you know that you're pulling a plumbing permit or an electrical permit or you're knocking down a wall, there's a lot of things that I don't think people are aware of from a permit perspective. So just
I would agree with that, Brandy.
stating that from personal experience. Just saying.
Just saying.
Just saying. So thank you. Yolanda, go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess, so Steve brought up the fact our personal buildings, so our, personal meaning town buildings. So you have the public safety building, you have the Warren, the Mendez going on. Are our inspectors, are they all just contracted for that? So they're getting paid on a per inspection basis, even for our buildings?
A lot of times we waive the fees to the project, but we
Okay.
still have to pay the inspectors though.
Okay,
So-
okay,
And that's one of the reasons, so you'll still see a line item in the budget for inspections, to pay for inspectors.
okay. But it's not like, we're giving a bill to the public safety building for every inspection that happens.
No.
Right? Okay, just checking. I know we need to inspect these buildings and we're using our staff to do that, but okay.
It all washes
Okay.
out.
Okay, so Michael, so next steps on this, we're not taking a vote on anything tonight. Is this going to be something that we're going to need to vote on at our next meeting?
I would ask, yes, for the next meeting, if we can get you the right information in time.
Sounds good. All right, does anybody else have any questions or comments before we move on?
I would just say that's similar. If we could get, trying to read, current fees, new fees might be a little bit, I know he has the electrical and the plumbing and the gas. It's not a straightforward spreadsheet to look at. So I don't know.
I
If
agree.
there's a slightly different way we could look at it, that'd be great.
All right, thank you, Michael, and thank Doug for us as
Yes.
well. For bringing this to us. Moving on our agenda, discuss the resignation of Lakshmi Krishnan and ask the town clerk to add the planning board seat, which will expire in 2025, to the May 17th, 2022 election ballot. So I know that we had received the resignation from Lakshmi from the planning board, which will be effective on May 16th, 2022, right before the election. I know her intention was to serve the remainder of this year and then open up her seat for candidates that wanted to run in May. Michael, I know she worked with the state and you and Peter to try to make sure that resignation was done in a way that was very, very clear. And I think the only thing that we need to do on our end is to vote to have this added to the ballot for May, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So does anyone have any questions or comments before we take a vote?
No,
Nope.
pretty straightforward. It's unfortunate, but it happens. People move.
And I just want to thank you to Lakshmi for her 2 years on the planning board and her years on the Ashland Cultural Council before then, and all of her contributions to our community. She is my neighbor and my friend, and I will really miss her just personally. So, and we all wish her the best and thank her for her service. So with that, does somebody want to make a motion?
Sure, I move that we ask the town clerk to add the seat of planning board with an expiration of May 2020. I think it's on there. I missed it. Sorry.
2025.
2025, so that people, residents can pull papers to run for that seat for this election.
Second,
Not very
Okay, roll
elegant,
call
but
vote.
Greaves, aye.
Mitchell, I.
Here, I,
Kinsman, aye. It passes 400. Thank you, guys.
and just, when's the, how long do people have? Is it March 29th they have to get their papers in? Do we know
It
that?
is.
Okay.
Yes, it is March 29th, and from what I gather, I believe that papers for this particular seat will be available in the town clerk's office starting tomorrow. So I would encourage folks to take out papers. This is separate from the other seat that is already on the ballot for May, which is a 5-year seat, and this will be a 3-year seat. So,
Well, hopefully we'll get some good candidates.
yeah.
Step up, folks.
Thank you, Rob, for that reminder. Okay. So moving on our agenda, discuss returning to in-person meetings. So I know we were talking a little bit about COVID with Mr. Giussoni at the very beginning of our meeting tonight. We've all had some thoughts around going back to in-person meetings, and I know we wanted to wait until the COVID numbers had really started to decline, that people felt safe. And when we say about in-person meetings, we're really talking hybrid meetings, because we are going to continue to allow not only remote participation from board members, which means, while quorum would need to be met in person, board members outside of quorum can still remote in, as well as the public. So that would be part of this as well. So when we say in person, it really will be a hybrid meeting that we'll be going to. So I'll open it up and for comments and questions. Rob, go ahead.
Sure, yeah.
You're muted, Rob.
Sorry, you missed some real pearls of wisdom there. I find these Zoom meetings very convenient and useful. And I think we passed the stage where I think we'll continue with hybrid meetings because I think they have a lot of utility. I think in terms of COVID, we probably, can start going back in person. I understand that. I think I do like the idea of hybrid meeting because I think it's very helpful both for us, but also the staff and the citizens who want to listen to the meetings or maybe participate without having to spend hours at town hall. And also the people coming before us for various business, like getting permits. I think it's a real great advantage. So when we do come back in person hybrid, I just hope that our technology is up to it. We had, I think, a fairly good session a few months ago, but I think it's important that we have quality remote participation, which is, frankly, more complicated than just doing a pure Zoom call. So things that can happen. So I hope we're up to that technology task.
Okay.
So that's, I don't know, Michael, if you wanted to comment on that or.
No, I mean, I think the tech, I think there is a lot of utility in the hybrid meetings. I personally like I like in-person meetings. I just feel like there's better communication that way. But there is a lot of utility to the hybrid meetings. I think for people who are not necessarily comfortable with going out in public yet, but also people who have maybe some issues with hearing, things like that. This really does help them. And I think we've heard from a couple of people who were affected by that have had positive experiences. The technology thing, I'm a little concerned about that because you're right, we did have a good session, but since then we've tried a couple of different times and it hasn't necessarily worked that well. So it's definitely going to be a learning process.
Yolanda, go ahead.
So I'm so excited to get back to in-person, but I also strongly want us to make sure we stay with hybrid. I think, as Rob said, there are many benefits to those who want to watch our meetings and still they can participate, but not have to be sitting in town hall. I think we do have the technology. Some communities around us have stayed in person the whole time. Holliston Select Board, they meet every week and they've been meeting in person through the whole pandemic. So I think it's, I'm definitely ready. I would say that we started as of March. That would be my recommendation, that we start, our first meeting in March, or if that's too soon, but the sooner the better, because I agree with Michael. In person there's benefits to hybrids. I mean, there's benefits to Zoom because, I had dinner, I finished at 10 to 7 and I was able to get on the meeting at 7. But you miss the in-person connection. And I want us to get back to that, but keeping the hybrid, because I think for our residents who want to watch and participate, they want to be able to keep doing that. So that's my thoughts.
Thanks, Yolanda. Steve?
I think, clearly, I think we've all committed to maintaining a hybrid system. I don't think that's in question at all. I think, personally, I have grown to actually like the Zoom component more than I thought I would over a period of time. And I think predominantly because of various meetings where you have consultants that don't necessarily have to travel to town to participate and to be involved in important discussions. So I think it's a cost savings to the town. It's just more efficient and effective way to conduct business in many cases. The other reason why I think, hybrid is here to stay, certainly. And, it's interesting, how many times have we been live in the select board meeting? And literally the only audience we had was Mr. DeSoni. And it's happened many times. And unless there's a particular issue that drives people to the select board room, we typically have the room to ourselves. But I think having this environment allows many people to, we've all been on meetings where we've had 50, 60 people in a meeting. I think that is effective engagement. And I think to continue that is really what we're committing to. And but I'm glad to be coming back to a live meeting. And I guess if the State House could open up their doors at the end of the month, I think we should open our doors as well.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. So Michael, from a technology standpoint, I know you had said Paul Bowden and Paul Carpenter were working on a couple things to make sure that the technology worked. Do you think that if we plan to go back to an in-person hybrid meeting for our first meeting in March, does that give them enough time to make sure that everything will work, the way that we would want it to?
I'd say probably a more realistic deadline or timeline, Brandy, would be the second meeting in March. Just because I know we're not going to be able to spend a whole ton of time on it, like right away. The other thing I just want to point out is not only do they need to implement the technology and incorporate it and make sure it's working properly, they also have to teach us how to use it and to troubleshoot and to fix things like that. So just want to temper everybody's expectations.
Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's not like it's an urgent need to go back in person. So I think it is important to make sure we can do it properly without undue stress and strain. My other question is, what is the impact of our decision on the other town committees and their practices? Are they all obligated to do what we do? Can they continue to be remote at their own discretion?
I think that's a good question, Rob. I don't know if there's a black or white answer on that. Let me check and see if there is.
Okay.
And if not, I think that would be probably a more robust discussion with the board.
Yes, yeah.
to Do that.
Okay, thanks.
Now, Mark, I know you have your hand up. Can you can unmute yourself if you have a comment, question.
Okay, I thank you. I would like to go back in person to person if I was to take care of my own dad. So this helps being hybrid. And I know with the cable technology and everything that has to be worked together, get the audio video to work and send it out to the homes. It's a bit of a busy sort of way of doing things. It's technology difficulties at times. But yes, I like the idea of this discussion about being hybrid and all. Being understood and being a what's the best way of saying? Citizen participator. It gets the word across, but then again, all the other boards and committees, they still have the decisions would be a remote hybrid. They want to do it either way, but to talk about it is a progress that is going to be slow to get. And before the pandemic did hit, everything was working in person, but now we're getting back to doing the baby steps to get back there. So I'm understanding the idea, the words being together and being on hybrid. So yes, I agree to it. And I appreciate the shout out of who likes to be on. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, sir. And I just like to just put out there that I've been doing this for over 15 plus years and get the information live, either way, hybrid, but you get the information live. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. We'll make sure we have a hybrid setup so you can continue to participate from home. So, okay. Yolanda, go ahead.
Just one last thing, and I don't know if we want to do this individually or as a board. Currently, the extension is either till the end of June or beginning of July. If we think this is something, if the ability to do hybrid is something we want long-term, I recommend we reach out to Jack and reach out to Karen and say, let's make this a permanent thing. Let's make this something that communities can do, because we are showing, as Steve said, that we have increased participation at our select board meetings when people can participate hybrid. So I think we need to look at the state level so that it's not just an emergency declaration, but it's an ongoing, you can continue to do your meetings hybrid indefinitely. So I think we need to get something out there.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Steve, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Rob. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, Steve was following protocol. I was just ad-libbing. So go ahead, Steve.
So just quickly, I'm not sure, Yolanda, if we need the legislature to tell us that we can or can't do a hybrid meeting, meaning to allow the public to participate through that mechanism. Now, the emergency measures are really related to how we as a body meet and conduct business. So I think we've already addressed the fact that we could have remote participation by a member that is not available to be in person. So I'm not quite sure. Now, I agree with you.
I'm not sure.
I agree with you that we should advocate for whatever makes it most representative of participation, whatever that may be. But I don't think the legislature needs to tell us how we interact with the public.
You don't think that us doing a hybrid is part of that emergency ruling?
I don't. I think once we get back to, just for the sake of discussion, this emergency expires.
Right.
And we're back at live meetings.
Yep.
What's to prevent us? We don't need a governor or a legislature to tell us, okay, you can continue to have people participate in a hybrid sense. I don't believe that was the intent, or that's what it says. So
okay, I would just say let's double check that, because I mean, one of the reasons, I mean, it could be, but let's just double check that.
And I would just add to that conversation. For example, as you know, on the MBTA advisory board, and I don't know where our authorization to meet remotely comes from, but I know we don't want to go back to meetings at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday in the transportation building. That would be
Right.
horrible. So
Well,
we
that's.
got
I
to
think-
safeguard that as well.
I think that is part of either the emergency or your board, similar to how we voted in remote participation, would have to vote that in as well.
Right.
Yeah.
But that
Which
was.
people
remote
would.
That was remote participation for ourselves,
Correct,
Not-
right,
not-
for the board members,
not for the public.
right.
So we're just advocating that, moving forward, that component, that technology, we want to maintain so that
Continue.
the public can
Can participate
be
remotely.
engaged. Yes.
Yep.
So it sounds like, we're going to move towards having our March 16th meeting in person pending, technology confirmation that we're kind of good to go. Right, Michael? Does that sound good? Okay, sounds good.
Good.
Okay, let's move on. We have our consent agenda. Could I get a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented, or does anyone
So
have any
moved.
Second,
roll call vote, please?
Greaves, aye.
Mitchell, I.
Here, I,
Kinsman, aye. That passes 4-0-0.
yeah, and thank Amy Caruso for her service on the Ashland Cultural Council. Sure. Thank you, Amy.
I'll second that.
I'll third that.
Absolutely. Thank you. So moving on to our priority project update. Michael, do you have an update on the rail transit district?
I do not have an update on the rail transit district. No. Actually, I do have one. I did ask Attorney Mead today if she's heard from counsel from either Mr. Gaynor or UGC, and she has not. So we'll see what happens with that.
Okay.
So.
And no updates from the YMCA. It's from
I know they're still in the process of doing the feasibility study. I did talk a little bit with Peter Weisgarber today, and hopefully they're going to be developing an FAQ that a lot of us can utilize when people ask us questions about what's going on with it, to kind of outlay the timeline and the process of what they're doing. So hopefully we'll get that soon, and we can use that as just kind of, I'll use it as a way to get information out.
They're also in the process of sort of reaching out to higher level potential donors as they finish this part of the feasibility study.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of it as well.
Good. But yeah, I don't have anything else regarding that.
Downtown?
So downtown, they're still plugging along. They still plan on doing a lot of work on Homer and that intersection with Summer Street as well. They're working on drainage. They're also working on some of the more utility centric type of stuff. Actually, we went today and looked at one of the plans, or in one section of the plans. They're looking at doing a 12-foot sidewalk along the farmer's market property, and we're looking at reducing that to potentially 6 feet. So I'll have more information about that after our weekly meeting tomorrow. So
Isn't it 12-foot what was decided on originally?
it was 12 feet, but then you look at how much it takes off of the farmer's market property, or I shouldn't say it's the farmer's market
It's
property.
not the
but
farmer's market property, but
I know, but where the farmer's market is, and it seems a bit excessive.
yeah, but couldn't they use that as, they could put some of the vendors on this 12 feet, right? Rather than in grass.
Why? I think they'd rather be on grass. But
Um,
why would you advocate for a 12-foot sidewalk when every other sidewalk in town is 6 to 8 feet wide? Why would you need a 12?
Well, was it just a sidewalk, or was it also part of the
It's a sidewalk.
multi?
It's a sidewalk. It's not part of the multi.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I should have been clear about that.
Okay.
Is that different from the rest of Front Street, or is it just for that section along where the farmer's market is, or is it in the entire?
It's just for that section. The sidewalk varies in width all throughout the project. So I think closer to Town Hall, I believe it can go out to 9 feet. I think that's about the largest section other than this 12-foot section, but that was really more to accommodate dining outside. Most of the other places, it's around that 6 to 7 foot mark. So that's all I have on downtown.
Public safety and Mendez School?
Public safety. So we recently had a meeting of the Public Safety Building Committee yesterday. Actually, I'll let Jen and Steve talk about that if they would like, because we need a break.
Go ahead, Jen.
So the public safety building continues to move along. Much of the work is sort of happening on the inside. They are doing a little work on the back end retention wall. You may see people working out there, and they've also poured the slab for what will become our communication tower. They're sort of trying to coordinate, some of the work on the outside with erecting that structure so that they don't sort of compete. On some of the interior finishes, we're making some headway in sort of choosing the furniture. There's been a working group from the police department and the fire department working with our architects just to sort of pick the furniture that will work in each of the spaces. And we're waiting for a full proposal on that. They've chosen their fitness equipment for the fitness room, so working on procuring that, as well as choosing and laying out the dispatch console. So it's really starting to come to feel like it's much more real and not just sort of a structure of steel, where we start to think about how these departments will sort of work within the new department, which is pretty exciting. Steve, I don't know if I missed anything, but.
No, it's pretty good. I think if you drive by on a regular basis, you can see the window installations going in. Almost all the windows are in. The rubberized portions of the roof coverings has been almost completed, and they'll be ready for the finished roof material. The retaining wall is an interesting part of the project. It's almost like Lego blocks what they're building, and as it wraps around, so it looks like it gets installed pretty quickly as they move around. I think they're all the way around the behind the apparatus base at this point, but it's moving along pretty quickly. I didn't have any change orders yesterday, which is a good thing, but these projects always do, and it's exciting. We're moving quickly to completion.
Getting there.
That is exciting. Michael, do you have any updates on the Mendez School?
I know that there was a meeting on the 15th, and there were a number of things that we were looking at doing on that meeting. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it. Oh, Yolanda, do you want to take it?
I can give an update. So a couple of different things are moving forward in regards to some of the procurement and some of the groups that we're going to be using for different product and different parts of the project. We did get notified that the first phase of any blasting has been completed. They had thought they were going to do about 40 to 45 blasts. They wound up only doing 23 blasts. They did not see as much ledge as they had thought. They found more rock. There was a group of trees that they had hoped to save, but they weren't able to because of the slope that would have had to go up to those trees. So we'll be putting more trees back. And we have now a schedule. We're meeting again on March 10th. To finalize some things that are going to the state, but things are moving forward. They've taken some of the rock and moved it sort of as a berm around some of the houses on Concord Street to try to make the sound issues a little bit less. And that's it.
Thank you, Yolanda.
Yep.
Route 126 project, Michael?
Yes. Let me give you an update on the schedule. And I'm not necessarily sure if you received this in your packet. If not, I will certainly get it to you. Let's
We
see.
did. It was in
Okay.
the packet, the whole detail,
make
month,
sure.
month by month.
Yeah, so you get an idea. I think in January and February, really most of the work that's being done is by Eversource using the utility poles. And then that's in March is really where we're anticipating a lot of the road work to start or continue, I should say. One of the things that the contractor is lobbying for, I guess you could say, is night work, doing some work at night, specifically the milling and paving. Hoping to do sections of 500 to 1,000 feet at a time, and they would start from the southern end, the Holliston end. And then they're also continuing to lobby to blast to get rid of some of that ledge that's over in the corner of Spyglass over there where the rotary is, and where even though most of that's done, they still needed to do some excavation. My personal opinion is that they shouldn't be blasting. I think we would really need to weigh how much longer it would take to use the hoe ram versus the blasting to make any kind of really informed decision though about that.
Michael, is that Spyglass or is that by the bank? Where they
I'm
need
sorry.
to do it?
I'm thinking
And
of
by the Dunkin' Donuts.
No, it's really more towards Spyglass.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll check with Doug. I don't think that they're talking about doing blasting in that area that you're talking about around Dunkin' Donuts, but I'll double check.
Okay.
And then basically, I think long story short is, as Doug so eloquently puts it, as bad as this past year was, it's going to be worse this coming year in terms of disruption. So just ask everybody to be patient. And so that's 126.
And Michael, the schedule that you shared with us, that will be part of the communications that get, routinely shared out to the residents as part of the construction updates.
We do. I think Doug really wanted to go through and have one more meeting with the contractors associated with it and MassDOT to get it as accurate as possible for this time before sending it out. But yes, we will.
Moving on to the Valentine Project.
Yep. So as you know, we had allocated funds to disassemble the barn and rebuild it when the weather got warmer. And so Doug Scott is starting to pull together that information now that would be necessary to put that out to bid.
Sounds good. And also just as another update, Steve and I have worked on the draft restrictions, the CR restrictions. We're going to plan to bring that to the next meeting to have a kind of a bigger discussion about, in general, next steps with the project and what we're, getting a holder and those types of outstanding issues as well. So town council had provided some information to us that we'll be talking to you all about and making some recommendations about public forums and other ways to make sure we get public engagement on this. So that'll probably be the next meeting. Michael, you had said we were going to ask Attorney Mead to join us for that Article 97 discussion, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. I think that would be good. Rob, you have a question?
Yeah, just a couple. One is just a note at our last meeting we talked about, and this is kind of related, I think, the property restrictions working group. And so I just want, have we been advertising that yet? I know I guess decided to reach out to former members as a starting point, but I think we should kind of post that along with a description of what we're looking for and try to get some people. I've been getting questions about the status of the committee. It might be good to just put something out there, just kind of defining what we're looking for. And if we're not sure, we should probably put it on the agenda to make sure we have an understanding of what we're looking for at this point. But I would ask that we, start advertising that a little bit and get the talent bank forms.
Okay, well, I know we've definitely, there is a conservation restriction working group. I know we were thinking about changing the name.
Yep.
We've got to do that on the website, which we need to do, but I do know that we have added it as a category for the talent bank form as well, if people are interested.
Yeah, I think we just need to get the word out there. And I'd actually had trouble remembering, I know, what we exactly decided last, but I did review the minutes. So anyway, and the other thing is, and Brandy, that's good. I did want to, we had a discussion, I think a favorable discussion about forming a 501c3, and I would just ask that, we should note to have that be part of our discussion next meeting, to give, at least take a position or think about what kind of guidance we could give on that or not give on that. I happen to think we should try to figure out how to encourage that process and how to sponsor it. But it seems to be favorably accepted by people. So if that's, if that's true, I think we ought to try to put a little meat on that proposal. And maybe your meeting our next meeting is the time to do that.
Steve, go ahead.
Thanks, Brandy. So, yeah, essentially in agreement with you, Rob. I think we have indicated collectively our at least initial support of moving forward with supporting a organization, whatever that may be, whatever shape it takes. It's really something that I think is out of our hands. And we would be waiting for, as supportive as we may be, we're waiting for, I think, interested and passionate parties to come together and to start that process. Hopefully with the ability to, I guess, move forward with maintaining, enhancing, promoting the property in the way that. And when I say the town, I'm not talking about town government here. I'm talking about the town, meaning all residents are essentially looking for in a property like that. So I think we're all enthusiastic about moving forward. I think, probably we're all a little frustrated as well, just by the slowness of things. But, seems to me like there's going to be plenty of work getting accomplished this coming year, whether it's the barn dismantling, whether it's the cleanup of the brush, whether it's the rebuilding of foundation, whether it's the cleanup of the hot spots on the property. So it seemed to me that there's going to be quite a bit of work going on there in a reasonably near future. So.
Yeah, we've already got a proposal, I think, for the removal of those hot soils that you talked about, Steve,
Yeah.
Which really, it was at the level where if we needed to do anything, or if we wanted to do anything, we'd have to get those cleaned up. Fortunately, it's not a big deal. It's interesting, we talked about the Article 97 thing briefly. I was talking to a group of senior citizens today, some of them lifelong Ashland residents, and we were talking about this, and we were talking about the Article 97 limitations and the protections that it provides and some of the redundancies. But one of them brought up, I know we've been talking about Article 97 as it applies to the whole property, which, as we all know, consists of 3 properties. And one person asked, I'm not necessarily sure if we thought of this before and I just forgot about it or not, but suggested, why don't we just look at removing the Article 90, if we wanted to go in this route, down this road, look at removing the Article 97 status for just the property with the barn and the house, and still leaving it on the rest of the properties, which would have met the intention, I think, of the select board and CPC at the time. And I think the way we presented it to people, but that was an interesting thought. And I don't know if that makes it more palatable to folks.
Well, we should definitely explore that. Absolutely.
I would definitely supporting that. Look,
I
'cause,
don't know. I just think we're looking at delays in getting things done by going down that route. But I still want to see a real hard. Well, I just want to see a real hard case made that we can't do what we can't and cannot do with Article 97 if we're going to have that conversation.
Well, we should have the conversation, Rob, and you know,
All right.
regardless of what direction it goes in, I think it's deserving of a conversation. And honestly, no one has ever answered the question to me as to whether the restrictions are redundant. If you have both the CPA restriction and or a Article 97, is it redundant? Now,
Right.
you know, I don't know that. I have one legal analysis from town council that suggests that it is, but you know, I'm sure there's other points of view that I'd like to try to understand. I think it's a valid discussion point.
Yolanda, did you have questions or comments?
Yeah, so I find it interesting that again, you know, the conversation about a 501(c) has come up. It's been something that's been recommended from when we purchased this property, right? We didn't talk about it that much, but the idea that if members of the community wanted to create that, we would support it because it's a partnership. I mean, it was interesting. I was in Central Park 3 weeks ago, and there's a big sign there that talks about that Central Park is owned by the town or city of New York, but they have an organization that does fundraising, that does all kinds of stuff to support Central Park the way it is. So it's not like if someone decides to create a 501(c), we then hand over the property to the 501(c). It's a partnership between that organization and the town. And one of the big things that I've been a proponent of is just trying to decide what we're going to do with that property, right? We thought we had a potential idea, you know, when we sent out the RFP, and then things came up, so that couldn't happen. I mean, it's an idle asset right now. It's not doing much good. It's not being used for anything. And there's been no final decision as to what can happen there. And now, you know, with the barn, we're looking at taking the barn apart. So that's great. And then we can rebuild it. You know, but the 501(c) is not a new idea. It's been talked about and recommended and, you know, mentioned to people since we purchased the property.
Yolanda, just to follow, so what are you saying about it? That they wouldn't be in a position to decide how it could be used or to have input on
It would be a partnership. They would have input, right? It's not the 501, you know, unless that's a decision we as a community make that says, okay, we're going to have the 501(c) take over this property. But you can't just assume that's going to happen, right? It has to be a decision and the community has to support it. And whatever's going to be done there has to be something that is supportable.
Yeah, I just want us to have a mechanism to move forward. And if it's this nonprofit and they make recommendations to us, I think that's great.
I think, Rob, we're gonna talk about that at our next meeting.
Sure. Sounds good.
Can I
yeah,
just say one more thing, Brandy? And I think, Rob, you know, it goes to the way the conservation restriction is written is what dictates what can and can't be done on the property. So that's, to me, is the starting point. Now, ideally, we would go hand in hand with writing the restrictions and having a restriction holder. Now, that doesn't always work. You know, some people say, well, you should have the holder first and then you write the restrictions. It's done both ways. So I don't know if there's a right way or a wrong way. I'm not going to argue that. But the fact is, that's what determines what can and can't be done on the property. And then the rest of it, the partnership, as Yolanda speaks to, is based on that document.
Good point. So we should go in that direction first.
Okay, I see Robin and Cindy Hicks on the call tonight. Just want to give them an opportunity to speak if they want. Robin, I see your hand raised. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Am I on mute?
Yep, you're good.
Oh, good. Maybe good for some people. I sent an email around to the select board members, get responses from most of you, some not. The concern of the Ashland residents is that this thing has been sitting for 4 years. Nothing has been accomplished. It's very frustrating for all of us. This has to be moved on. We, a number of us are establishing a Valentine Citizens Group that would like the support of the Select Board and the Town Manager. We want to assist you and take this out of your hands. We're looking to get a 501c3 established also and would ask for assistance. The Ashland residents want this and are willing to do it, but it needs to be in their control. People are frustrated that nothing has happened. It has been in the Select Board and the town administration's control for 4 years. Nothing has happened. It's been cabled. No one knew about it. It hasn't been advertised. The dumpsters are coming finally. We're going to work on that, cleaning that up, which is a blessing. And by the way, thanks for the cabling. And I talked to Doug Scott. He explained why Framingham Welding was there to put more cables in. I think that was a great solution to solve to put a Band-Aid on the problem. He explained that they're going to put requests for proposals to remove the siding, to remove the roof. No Ashland resident knows about this. This has not been communicated to anyone. It's a shame. We want to work this thing. If you look at the Ashland residents, they want the Valentine estate to be proud of. And nothing has happened in 4 years. It's a frustration to all of us. And I believe it's a frustration to the Select Board and the Town Manager. You know, we have to get something done and we haven't got it done. Let us form a 401c, 501(c)(3). And I've been advocating people to help out, and because I have no idea how to do this, and I'll be truthful. But there are a lot of people who have volunteered. Put it in our control. Of course, you guys oversee it. The town owns it. But let us do the thing that we can do and get it off your plate.
I would just.
And the second thing I'd like to ask is, next meeting, can you put this stuff in the front of the meetings instead of to the end? I almost fell asleep, no offense. I have the couch up here and I had my head on the pillow. But if we could put this towards the front of the meetings a little bit so people know what's going on, please. Thank you.
If I could just say one thing, and I'm only bringing this up because what was just raised, and I know there's been a big debate about Article 97 and the restrictions, but I just want to really make it clear from a legal standpoint that our restrictions that were granted to the town as part of this whole process are specific in our restrictions to all of the lots, specifically, inclusively. Okay, so removal of any of those lots from Article 97 puts our restrictions to be deemed voidable. Just want you to be, I mean, it sounds like a great idea, but I mean, I think we'd have to come back to the table and have a discussion because it's because our restriction specifically, as it was written by town council, is inclusive to all of the lots of the property.
And on another note, I've been in contact with Scott LaBelle, who's, you know, we're talking because he knows the 501. What is it? 501? I keep on getting out. 501. That's what I'm not going to take it. Helen Nicole, who suggested a festival to raise funds. So the will is out there and people want to do this, but they're afraid if they're raising these funds, it's going to go into a general fund and not into a fund just for the Valentine estate.
Michael, go ahead.
No, Robin, I think that's great. I think fundraising, you know, is a good activity to do, and I think we can set something up to where, I mean, if it's going to be under a 501c3, it wouldn't have the towns, it wouldn't go into the general fund, and I think we could potentially even set something up here at the town that would allow us to do that. One of the I think driving forces behind putting so much money or allocating so much money towards the rebuilding of the barn, if you will, the reconstruction of the barn, is that you should have ample matching funds also for grants that you want to apply for. I mean, we would be talking about probably close to 1.5 million. You know, we should be able to leverage that for things. And I know things go, I know it's slow. I don't think it's fair to say that nothing's been going on there. I know it certainly isn't as fast as I would like to go, and I know it's certainly not as fast as you would like to go. But I do think, you know, there have been things done, and I appreciate you recognizing some of them. But I don't know. I just have to say this. I feel like this is such an adversarial thing that doesn't necessarily need to be adversarial. We agree on so many different things and so many different points, but I feel like there's this air that we're all trying to work against each other, or there's conflict when there really doesn't need to be conflict. And maybe it's just a simple matter of communication, which, you know, I can take some.
I think so.
Talk of sale.
So one of the things, Michael, is that communication, and the frustration is that the tops are on the roof and they're shattered. People couldn't see the cabling being done. People couldn't see that the inside of the building of the Valentine house was being cleaned up. So you look at it and you think, what the heck, the barn's falling down, nothing's been done. And that's what the important thing is communication, and let's show progress. And it's in your face. The dumpsters are going to be there. That backyard's going to be cleaned up. We've got volunteers to help the town. So when you ride by there constantly, you see nothing really done, but something is being done. It's a frustration to a lot of people. And I get the calls at least once a week, emails at least 3 times a week. What's going on? I don't know. I'm just a neighbor. But really, I think you have to put this in the residents of Ashland's, their face, and show that something is happening. And once the barn starts getting dismantled and the siding gets taken off and the roof gets taken off, then that's something. Once the dumpsters are there, then that's showing the people that something's getting cleaned up and finally something's getting done. Not that I'm saying nothing's been done. I thought that the Valentine Committee cleaning up the inside of the house, they did a fantastic job. But it's the barn that sticks right in your face.
And Robin, just to say, all of us here share your frustration. Because
I know you do. I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, Brandy. Believe me, I'm supportive of the select board. I'm supportive of town administration wholeheartedly, but we have to move on this thing.
Absolutely. We appreciate your reaching out to all of us. And I know that, we want this to be a community project. This isn't a select board project. This isn't a town manager project. This is an Ashland project. So, whatever decisions that get made that we do is going to be all together. And so, to Michael's point, like we just, I think there's room for the folks that you've been talking to, Robin, that want to be a part of this, and the Valentine Committee that's been working so hard on this for the past 2 years. I think, we've got some really motivated, smart people, and we have to figure out the financial piece of this and what that's going to look like and how we're going to get there. But I think, I'm optimistic that we'll get there. And I think that our next meeting we'll put this up, as a line item in the front of our agenda. So, no 10 o'clock Valentine update promise. So we'll, but we appreciate your wanting to get involved and wanting to do this, because it's I know you're right there. You have a very personal vested interest in wanting to see this succeed, and just know that we do too. So, but we appreciate your input and wanting to get this moving forward.
So how do we do that, Brandy and Select Board and Michael? How do we get this thing moving forward before getting it stagnated for another year? What is the agenda? Do we have a plan? Do we have, I know Michael and Doug, the plan of taking the barn down, but what are the requests for proposals? What are the requests for, I know Doug and Jen are working on the request for proposals for doing that. They said by the spring, but how are we going to contract by the spring? We get the request for proposals out, then it's going to take 3 months, and then it's going to take another 3 months. And in this building, how are we going to move this forward? It's already February. Now we're looking at April, May, June. And then it's going to sit probably foundation dug. I haven't seen a projected timeline on any project management schedule on a Gantt chart. What's the deadlines? When are we going to say, okay, they're going to dig the foundation, they're going to pour has any of that been put together?
We'll have to put that together, Robin.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
And if you need any help, I've done that many times.
This is the construction management
So-
talking.
Yeah, I can hear it coming through.
And I'll sit down with Doug on it, over a cup of coffee, no charge.
Thanks,
But,
Robin.
yeah.
Thank you.
Right, thank
You're
you,
welcome.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Again, thank the Select Board and for all that you do for the town at no cost. Appreciate your services.
We're the best paid volunteers that you can get.
Yeah.
All right, Rob, you had your hand
Yeah, I
up.
just want a quick wrap up. So I think at least the way I would find helpful, Steve brought up a very good point about, aside from the ongoing project stuff we need to do to keep the house and the barn safe, getting the question of the conservation restriction in the Article 97 decided once and for all and as soon as possible, so we know what we can do. And then I personally would, if we, assuming we seem to be going down this route of working with a nonprofit, I could use some guidance for the next meeting about how we approach that kind of relationship, how we select or don't select the members, or how do we decide which group we're going to work with and what kind of responsibilities we're going to split with them. So I'm a little unclear on how that process would work. So I would find that helpful to have some at least ideas about that for our next meeting. So that's the two main things I see as needing to happen in terms of the overall timeline.
Thank you. Yolanda?
I mean, Robin, you're saying you have people who want to fundraise, who want to do stuff. You can start a 501(c)(3). You go to the state, you file it, you create a board of directors and say, we're creating a nonprofit to support this property. Our farmers market did it. They're a nonprofit. The dog park did it. They're a nonprofit, and they're now working with the town to create the dog park. I've recommended this for the Warren area, right? It's not that difficult, and there's not that much that has to happen to create the nonprofit and say, okay, this is a 501(c)(3). This is our board of directors. This is the people who are supporting it. And you can start raising funds. You open a bank account. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So, and there's a lot of information online.
But Yolanda, what if there's another nonprofit or other people say they didn't hear about it, wanted to be involved, and we don't like the board members? I mean, I don't know. Is it really that simple that we'll take whatever group comes up and says they want to do it? Maybe that'll work out fine. I don't know, but it's
a separate organization. I mean, unless we as the board want to create a nonprofit associated with the Valentine property, but I don't think that's necessary. So yeah, I think we need to have a further discussion about this. And maybe it's not at a regular meeting. Maybe it's I don't know, because
yeah, let's table this discussion. And at our next meeting, we can have some definitive discussions about the conservation restrictions and what's next, and then what we want to see as next steps for this. So I think all of this will kind of be a part of that. So
just a response to Yolanda. Yolanda, this has just come up in the last 2 weeks and I'm just kind of spearheading it, trying to get volunteers,
Well,
trying to get
and-
information, trying to
and-
find an attorney that I would
And
hire.
not to be adversarial, Robin, but as I said to you in my email, there was someone who you copied on the email who this was mentioned to before about creating a nonprofit. So maybe it's new to you, but it's not new to some of the other people that were on our email distribution. So it's where you're talking frustration, that's a little bit of the frustration as well, from my perspective
Yeah.
anyway.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Yolanda. I didn't see your email. I didn't get it.
Oh, okay. I'll double check. It came from my personal email, but I'll double check and
Yeah.
resend it if necessary.
It's Robin, ROBIN. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all. We'll continue this conversation and this discussion our next meeting. So unless, Michael, you have anything else on your priority project update, we can move on to town manager report and an update on notice of intent for legacy farms and house street drainage improvements.
Yep. So I think everybody is aware that we've had issues with one of the legacy farms phases of their development. And what that has done is that has caused an issue with our drinking water supply at the reservoir. So Legacy Farms was issued a notice of violation by both the Hopkinton and Ashland Conservation Commissions. As part of that, the engineer for Legacy Farms, Peter Bemis, was required to submit a plan on how to mitigate some of those issues. And as part of that process, what we do is we have that peer reviewed. And so what I've done is I've included the peer review from GCG Associates into your packet. And really, I think the gist of the report was that there still needs to be a lot of work done on the plan. And just to summarize and try to be pretty brief. I mean, we've had to increase the amount of chemicals that we've used to treat the water because of the amount of runoff and the polluted runoff that when I say pollution, I'm saying it's taken, lawn chemicals and things like that, not necessarily trichloroethylene or anything like that, PCBs, but it still provides a negative impact to our water supply. One of the infiltration basins lacks the groundwater recharge volume and the water quality volume to provide all the necessary stormwater treatments. Another infiltration basin was designed as an infiltration basin, but it's serving more as a retention basin because it hasn't been maintained. So that needs to be taken care of. And then really a lot of what's driving this is when you clear trees and you add all of these housing, you create impervious roof. This roof area is also impervious, and that's running also straight off into our water supply. So GCG is advising that Mr. Bemis provide a revised plan that helps address all of these issues, and hopefully those will be approved. Hopefully they'll be adequate, and then they will be approved by the respective permitting boards or permitting entities, and then we'll move forward to implementation, which we do expect Legacy Farms to pay for that.
All right,
Randy?
Rob, go ahead. Rob, you're muted.
I'm sorry, who's responsible for enforcing this, Michael?
So technically it's Hopkinton. I mean, we also have a role too, but DEP also has a role as well.
So I guess I have a basic question. Why were they allowed to do this within a water, recharge area in the first place? I thought our wells had protection zones and things like that.
I don't have the answer, Rob. Ashland didn't permit the project. I think it's a good question.
And then the other thing that strikes me immediately is we're having problems because These people in legacy farms are fertilizing their lawns, if I understand what you're saying correctly. I mean, that should just be stopped tomorrow. I mean, that's just ridiculous. You know, causing this kind of runoff into a water supply. You know, some people need to be sued. Some people need to be fired. You know, something went wrong here, and they need to start paying some money. I don't, you know, legacy farms, unbelievable. How did this ever happen in the first place? All right, that's enough.
So,
Go ahead, Steve.
well, Brandy, I'm going to echo Rob here because, you know, the way I read this, Michael, this, at least just the summary piece of it, it's some pretty serious stuff. And, you know, when you read something that the development failed to comply with their NPDES permit and associated stormwater permit, that sounds pretty egregious to me. So, you know, what recourses do we have relative to, you know, the points that Rob brings out and the points that this summary brings out as well? And I'm not quite sure who CGC is. Are they GCG? Are they an independent? Are they independently reviewing this?
Yes, they're our peer reviewer. They're the ones.
Our
that we
peer
retain.
reviewers. Okay, so
Yeah.
they reviewed this. And I'm assuming Hopkinton has done the same thing, or are we working in concert with Hopkinton?
We're communicating with Hopkinton. I have not seen one of their peer review reports.
Okay.
It's a really interesting dynamic. I don't know if you saw the land impacted, but there's land, that legacy at Valley Farms Development. So it's totally located within the town of Hopkinton.
Right.
But this affected area includes land in the town of Hopkinton that the town of Ashland owns, town and land that's in the town of Hopkinton that Hopkinton owns, and then also land in the town of Ashland that the town of Ashland owns. So it's quite the quagmire of
land. So
of land, yeah.
Is there any state-owned land as part of this?
There is DEP. Actually, yes, there is DEP land as part of this as well.
So in theory, the state should be an interested party here as well.
They are. I know I've submitted correspondence to DEP. I know Holliston, the Conservation Commission, I believe the Ashland Conservation Commission has submitted comments to them as well, and they're involved in the process.
Okay, all right. So what's kind of the timeline here?
Well, we're hoping to get revised comments within the next few weeks. So a revised plan, I should say.
Yeah.
Then that will incorporate GCG's comments. And then, well, hopefully it'll meet the requirements that GCG has laid out. And again, the next step would be the implementation of those mitigation plans.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
So Michael, is it enforceable that they would have a revised plan that addresses these issues? Because like what, you know, the oversight on it, you know, I worry about, because, you know, it almost sounds like we're hoping that they come up with a plan that does this, but, you know, I'm hoping that this peer review has real teeth to it.
Well, so they'll end up getting fined if they don't start moving forward with this, and some serious fines as well. You know, I think right now the thought process is that their money would be better spent on implementing the measures that the reports have outlined in terms of making sure this problem is fixed, as opposed to
just leaving some notes for you.
Sorry. So as opposed to spending the money on the mitigation efforts, as opposed to spending money on fines in a punitive way. But I think to that point, I think Rob's, you know, there should be some punitive action taken here as well.
Adios, Chef. You're the best. Sure.
Yeah, I agree with that, Michael. I think that's good.
Thinking outside the box, like
Sue them.
Kathy Van Lacker, can you please mute yourself?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Rob, were you did you have something else that you wanted to?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have any comments or questions on this, or Yolanda, go ahead.
I would just say, I mean, it's ridiculous that it's been going on this long, right? I mean, we first heard about this last summer when we had some really bad rain, and the fact that they're not addressing it as quickly as they should be, and then we're having to deal with additional costs to make sure our water is safe. I mean, I'm not usually one to say sue people, but let's get them to, fix this and pay for the extra costs that we're having, and let's get Hopkinton involved in this conversation. And if there's something we need to do there as a board to reach out to them and their board or something, or if we're not getting a response from Norman, let's whatever we need to do to make sure that they're working with us, because it's partly their water supply as well.
It is.
So that's a little ridiculous. But yeah, whatever we need to do. And thanks to Doug to keep working on this and use some of that strength of his to convince people to do stuff to do it.
Michael, did you have anything else you wanted to add on this, or no, you're good?
No, I think all the points are well made.
So let's move on. We have the Amoresco measurement and verification report for the 4th year of the performance contract.
Yes, so this is related to the performance contract that we actually passed back in 2014. And as part of that, Amoresco, the company that installed all these energy conservation measures, guaranteed a certain amount of savings that the town would see, with the hope that we would actually see better energy efficiency and more savings than what they had anticipated. So this year was the 4th consecutive year where they've actually been able to beat some of their expectations, which I think is really good. If you look at one of the charts in this very impressive volume that they provided with all this information, you'll see that our guaranteed savings this year was 278,000. We actually measured 303,000. So for an additional or in excess savings of $25,781. For this year, that equated to 1,318 of kilowatts saved, 70,000 natural gas therm saved, and then 1,400 gallons of water and sewer saved. And one of the, I guess, aggregate units of energy that people use is called the MMBTU. And so we saved 40,395 units of that. So this is working out the way we thought it would, which is always nice to see a plan come together and then actually come out according to plan. The 4-year savings has been pretty extensive. It totals over $1.1 million now. So in just the 4th year. So I hope you're pleased that we entered into it, and things are working out according to plan. I know I am. But anyway, there's no action required on this. I just wanted to provide it to you as a report.
Steve, go ahead.
Michael, will the new buildings be incorporated into this performance contract?
No. So all the work, so Amoresco came in and essentially retrofitted a lot of stuff that we currently have and replaced outdated equipment and energy inefficient equipment with more energy efficient equipment. The new building should have all of that stuff built in already.
Okay, I'm just curious because they do include street lighting, which I don't believe that they were part of the street lighting project when it was replaced years ago.
They were actually, yeah, that was one of the energy conservation measures.
Okay.
They utilized.
Very good. Yeah, I think we should all be pleased with the fact that this program is working the way we hoped it would.
Yeah, and I have required them to do this for the solar projects as well.
Yeah,
because it was technically done under the same procurement. They have yet to get that for me this year, but they have provided it in the past. I think it's just taking them a little while to collect the info.
Good. Did you double check all of the formulas in the report to make sure they were accurate?
Yes, as much as I could. So I don't know if you want me checking those types of formulas, but maybe an Excel sheet formula I could audit.
Good, thank you.
Sorry, Steve. Michael, so are they going to be doing this report for us for more years, or is this the last one that we'll receive from them?
No, they do it for 20 years.
Oh, for 20 years. Okay. I missed
Yeah.
that. That's great. Okay.
20-year
Thank you.
contract period. And if you remember, actually, Steve, I think what you're thinking of with the streetlights, we paid for the streetlight portion through a Green Communities grant.
That's right, yeah.
So, and then also we were able to get those competitive energy conservation bonds, which saved us about $1 million in interest costs over this 20-year
Okay.
period as well.
Good, thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments or questions?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I want to look at this report in some detail. Really didn't have time to look at it. But it's good. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
So unless you have anything else, Michael, we'll move on to board reports.
good.
Steve, you're up first. You're in the top left-hand corner.
Oh, okay. Thank you. A couple things. We probably should think about our BAA spring grant round as well coming up. Usually we kind of start putting it out in March. Susan, correct me if I'm wrong. We do like a March, April, and then award it the end of April, beginning of May type thing. So maybe next meeting, Brandy, we should put that on to set a date and get that advertised. The Ashland Lions Club is doing another food pantry drive, which is going to be on Saturday, March the 12th at Market Basket. And the Ashland Lions just did one back, I'm going to say in maybe October, November. And it was, just the kindness of strangers is just amazing. The amount of food that was donated and filled up the storage area of the community center. So, but that's scheduled for March the 12th. And then the last thing, and this is, I guess, another one of my soapbox items is our committee appointment process. We talked about it at our last meeting. I brought it up, I think, at our last meeting. And the reason I'm bringing it up tonight, again, is because of the racial equity report. And, listening to Michael and describing the task force and some of the issues they're going to be dealing with, my sense is that one of the areas that we are going to need to be addressing is how we appoint to committees and expanding access to our committee appointments, which unfortunately doesn't happen very well right now. So I think this is something that we need to put on an agenda and come to some decisions or solutions as to how we're going to appoint in the future. So that's something, Brandy, to put on the list as well. And I think it's probably something that we wind up coordinating with the task force report.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Yolanda, you're up next.
Not too much tonight. We had a Mendez meeting and I talked about that in our report. I had an MMA. I'm on a subcommittee of a policy committee talking about the regulations from DHCD regarding the transit housing and, through the MBTA communities. They're still looking for feedback and they had a couple of good questions in regards to the idea that it's, they're taking away some of our municipal control by putting some of these guidelines in place. And for some communities that are MBTA communities, it's going to be hard for them to create the zoning, and the fact that they can't use some of the housing that they just did to qualify for this. So that, they're looking for new zoning. So that was interesting discussion. So that's a continued discussion that's going on. And that's really it. Just thank you to Lakshmi for her work. I know she's still here through May. It's been great. She has been representing the planning board at the Metro West Regional Collaborative. So hopefully we'll get some, after May when she is gone, we'll have someone new representing the planning board. And that's it.
Thanks, Yolanda. Rob, you're up next.
Sure, just to follow up briefly on Yolanda's, I know we had requested some, or at least I requested some information on the zoning around, some kind of confirmation on this whole question. Is Peter preparing a report on that?
Peter's working on that, yes.
Okay, great. All right, that's good. And I'd sent, I think yesterday, just a quick report on the MBTA Advisory Board Commuter Rail Subcommittee meeting, which we had a few days ago. And a number of questions were asked. We had like 40 representatives there. It was quite well attended. And we got through a number of questions we met with the new Keolis CEO and the new MBTA commuter rail director. So both of them are new to the job. So it represents an opportunity for a new start. But we're putting together a process where we're trying to organize our questions and thoughts as a group together. And so I sent you folks just the questions that I'd gotten. I got some great suggestions, both from select board members and some members of the community that it hadn't occurred to me to ask about. So you saw those, they kind of range from on-time performance to the status of the station. And I also noted that we want to restart those starts about station ownership. That's our particular concern, but also, safety on the right of way. We had yet another car collision, and another community, I think was Weymouth, had a deadly, a fatal collision with an MBTA train just about the same time we had ours. So those kinds of things are continuing, and that's one of the aspects that we're going to be asking them about. And then it all runs, operational issues and stuff like that. So if folks have any other particular things they want, we're putting together that kind of consolidated questions to these new folks at Keolis and commuter rail. And the other thing is we're having an advisory board meeting. It's open to the public and certainly to other select board members. I think you all got the invitation. There's the agenda. Main agenda tomorrow is fare reduction, which I'm not sure actually yet how and if that affects us, but I'll be at that meeting. So there's that. And I did, one thing I wanted to bring up, we had the discussion, on Facebook about the pool. I think some of us read that at Keep Tech, and Brandy brought up, suggested people talk to Ed Berman, which was a good suggestion. He's our Keep Tech rep. But it occurs to me when we had this discussion about Ed's duties and how busy he is, we didn't talk about the fact that he's the Keep Tech rep and he's also the MWRTA rep, which I guess it's nothing against Ed. I think he's great, but I'm suggesting maybe there'd be other people we should appoint to those tasks, especially since he has other priorities that he is probably, I would say, a higher priority. We could probably find people to do that. So that would just putting that idea and thought in people's heads. Brandy, for one, has indicated a lot of interest in the MWRTA. So I'm not pushing, I'm just suggesting that we consider that. And again, nothing against Ed and what he's doing, but it seems to me that we have the opportunity to appoint some other people there, and that might be appropriate. And the other thing is I wanted to, following up on potential agenda items, we spent a lot of time on inclusionary zoning, which I think is, a great issue to talk about. But I also, want to go back to the Simpson property and the fact that we bought that like 15 years ago for a combination of affordable housing and open space. And I think this board ought to put that on the agenda for, some detailed discussion. And my thinking is that if we think we can go ahead with that we make some kind of charge to the Affordable Housing Committee to start doing some real work on that and get back to it. And Michael brought up some good points at the last meeting that there's some issues with the location. Well, let's let's really look into that and resolve this one way or the other, because we spent, some public money on that 15 years ago and we're not doing anything with it. So I think we ought to make that a priority to get that resolved, and I would ask that be put on the agenda sometime soon. And my other last ask for reminders that we're supposed to be with the Upper Charles Trail Committee about the exemption, not the exemption, but the route and the parcel list. And we had talked about doing that. And I just want to remind people that that's on our list to try to do. And I'll talk to the chair about that. But I want to, I just remind people that we should keep moving on that, at least take that starting point. So I guess that's enough for now. So thank you all. So on to you, Madam Chair.
You brought us to 10 o'clock.
I know. Uh-oh.
Do we
That's
need-
why you were looking at your watches. Okay.
I was gonna say, do we need to make a motion to go beyond 10 o'clock? Or we-
Not if you can keep it.
I
under
would
a
say
minute.
just do your board report and let's be done.
So I will make this really quick, I promise. So today, Michael and I were over at Zeta Fencing for the ribbon cutting for our new business.
That's
Soren
nice.
and Annette and their team were they're fabulous. So when we talk about fencing, we're not talking the fencing out in your yard. We're talking literally championship level, Olympic style, wonderful, wonderful training. They run a club that was in Natick for 20 years. And they have brought that to Ashland and are very excited about being part of our community. Thanks to Beth Reynolds and Ashley Place, who put together the ribbon cutting today. ABA was there. But they are really this is exciting. And they run classes from children to adults. And they said, anytime you want to come over and take a look at what they're doing, they run classes pretty much every day from 4:30 to 9. And they have a whole open area to sit in and watch. So it's really pretty cool. So they're a really great addition to Ashland. So welcome to Zeta. So at our recent meeting, we had talked about doing a multi-board meeting with Planning Board, ZBA, Affordable Housing Trust. I reached out to the chairs of those boards, and they are bringing that to their next meeting to see if their respective boards would be willing to do a joint meeting. The feedback was really positive, so I think we'll probably try to look at putting together this multi-board meeting possibly in April. We can discuss sort of the goals from the housing production plan that we put together and affordable housing, and have their priorities and goals. And when we look at the funding mechanisms, we can have kind of a really good broad discussion about what affordable housing looks like and how we all align all of our missions to make sure that we're all on the same page. And the last thing I wanted to say is, as part of Black History Month, I wanted to encourage folks. There's a program at the library next Wednesday, the 23rd at 7 p.m. Racism, Not Race, that is being sponsored by the library and also area. And it's kind of like they have two authors that are there to discuss, some of the myths around sort of genetic differences between race groups and what we can do about it. So I would encourage folks to, it's a virtual discussion. So, please mark your calendars if you're available. I think it would be a really great program that they are offering. So that is it for me. So, so thank you all for your patience tonight for my first meeting as
Great.
running the
Good
show.
job, Madam Chair.
You did
Yeah.
great.
Nice job.
So I wanted to finish before 10 o'clock, but we're at 10:04. So I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, sure, aye.
Thanks, Brandy.
All right,
you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Good
Michael,
job,
thank you,
Brandy.
Jen.
Good
Thanks.
job.
Susan.
Great night, everyone. We'll see you in a couple
Good
of
night.
days.
Good
Thanks.
night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.